Today on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, an ape named Caeser leads a revolution against his human oppressors. But am I talking about Rise of the Planet of the Apes or Conquest of the Planet of the Apes on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast?
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. They swap murders. Crisscross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails. But it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections that elude the casual eye. Try and spot them along with us. Today, so similar yet so different, we are covering 1972's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, a Caesar fan, but which Caesar remains to be seen.
And I'm Mark Clovis, who I think I've decided I prefer classic Caesar to new Caesar.
And my name is Hugh Escarpeta. I'm an actor, and the real Caesar I like is Julius, but we won't go there.
By the way, Mark is a history teacher, so if we want to go into that we could spend all podcast doing that one. If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Crisscross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. Today, just as always, we'll review our two films, and then we go crisscross to compare and contrast. But first, Mark, what media has swung through your trees?
Well, I had the opportunity recently to watch Civil War, the new Alex Garland movie, and I have to say it was really impressive. Nice. I mean, I've not seen all of Alex Garland's films. I've generally enjoyed them. I mean, I think that Annihilation is criminally underappreciated.
That's been on my to-watch list, like, for the longest time.
Yeah. They've been advertising the crap out of that one on Instagram.
Yeah.
You see it everywhere. It looks good.
Yeah. What have you been watching?
Recently, I've been keeping up with Shogun. That came out recently on Hulu. It's I don't know if I can even say these names, but yeah, Shogun. It's such a good piece of acting, cinematography, and the storyline. I just love it. I don't know if you guys seen it, but
I have not, but
No.
it's been one of those ones I've been intrigued by. I'm old enough to remember the original with Richard Chamberlain. It used to be that you could find copies of that novel on which it was based everywhere. And I think that's kind of was like, oh my gosh, Shogun again. But I've heard such good things about it.
it's so good.
How about you, Aaron?
Yeah. So I've been watching Fringe. It's a TV show that, Hugh, if you've heard of that.
I've heard of it, and I haven't seen any episodes.
It's kind of, I think after Lost, like a lot of people didn't get into, because it's J.J. Abrams' show right after Lost. He produced it. But I've been watching it for research for mystery boxes, and it handles them really well. I won't get into that because that's not what this is about. But the first season was a little slow, but I've just gotten into the second season, and I was about to say the plot element that comes in, but if you like Marvel, I'll say that there's a part that comes in that I think they handle much better than Marvel, but that's as far as I'll say. But season 2 really picks up, and I'm excited to keep going with it.
I think the other thing that hurt it was the fact that a lot of people compared it to the X-Files.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It's not the X-Files, but I mean, this is going to sound like heresy, but I actually prefer Fringe to X-Files.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's just so well done. It's the acting is so good. I mean, Anna Torv is so underappreciated. What she does later in that series, and people who've seen the series know what I'm talking about. It's just really, I think, very impressive acting.
Yeah, it somehow achieves being more grounded, but also going places that X-Files never went, and not as many aliens. But
I don't think there are any aliens in that one.
Yeah, that's kind of a rule for Fringe, I think. But yeah,
I did see that Airbender TV show.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah.
Oh, how is that?
I didn't like it.
Oh, that's too bad.
It was. I mean, if you've seen the cartoons, you'll be disappointed with the live action. It's just different
Mediums.
Different mediums. Like you're going from comedy to kind of serious with a little bit of comedy. It doesn't translate very well.
Yeah.
with this particular show. I mean, others probably do it better, but the acting was, I mean, they were young too, so I'll give them the grace, but it was rough.
I just do not understand why it is people feel the need to make live action versions of that. Because, of course, we have the M. Night Shyamalan movie, which was...
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
Do not talk about that.
The less said about it, the better. And the cartoon is just so well done. And it has such a great sequel to it, too. I mean, maybe it doesn't measure up in a lot of ways, but it is high quality. I would rather they do another cartoon series than to keep pounding their heads against this live action wall.
I think they have the comic, too, of like after the Fire Lord goes down and Zuko's looking for his mom. There's a whole thing about it. I don't know. They should put that on TV. Like,
Exactly. Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so you don't even have the comparison because it's covering different material. Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, so now we'll go into our reviews. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. Now our review of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, 1972.
Again, I'm going to be referencing my age. I grew up with the Planet of the Apes being this very large media presence. And this is something that I think a lot of us tend to overlook today, which is how big the Planet of the Apes were. I mean, I was thinking about it. It is difficult to think of a science fiction franchise prior to 1977 that was larger. I mean, the closest I would come is Frankenstein, but Frankenstein was really more of a horror franchise. But in 1975, you had 3 seasons of Star Trek: The Original Series, and you had 1 or 2 seasons of an animated series. In that time, you had 5 Planet of the Apes movies, 2 TV shows, a comic book series. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, I remember my mom talking about Planet of the Apes too, like, you know, because she was born before that, and she was telling me when I was growing up, yeah, Planet of the Apes was one of my favorite shows. I'm like, oh, it was big.
And those movies would show up in reruns all the time. They'd show up on basic cable, and it was out there. And that's how I came across the series. And of course, the way I came across it meant that it was kind of piecemeal. I'd see, the movies out of order, and then I'd watch them again, and it would kind of stitch them back together. But it was something that was far more present than it is today. And it was how I first got my exposure to it. And it kind of, dug its roots deep in my heart, which is something that I had to, I put out there to, keep in mind when we get to Rise to the Planet of the Apes, which we will do, of course. So,
and I hope you got that checked, properly licensed doctor. Sorry.
Yeah, and I felt the 72 version. I mean, it came out when it came out, and I thought it did a great job. I loved watching it, especially the end. We were talking about the end speech earlier, and I was just intrigued, captivated by like his delivery, and I just sat there and just listened. I'm like, man, this is amazing, what he was saying, and more how he delivered it than what he was saying.
That is good. Something that is always fascinating. I mean, Roddy McDowall, I often felt doesn't get the appreciation that he deserves as an actor. He never had that starring presence. He never seemed to really want it, though. But he was, to consider how he carried those films. I think there's only one film in which he doesn't appear as sort of the central chimpanzee, and he is just such a good presence, and he's able to act, to emote through this very complicated makeup, and he just does such a great job of it.
And his voice is iconic. Like, you just hear that voice, and it's like Planet of the Apes.
It is.
And you kind of had to, like, rely on acting more than the CGI or the cinematography at the time because, technology. Yeah. But, yeah, it showed.
Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen the live-action TV series they did, but I'd be really curious to see if the actors they had for it, because Roddy McDowall didn't do that. The central actor, I want to say, was Mark Lenard, the guy who played Sarek in the original series, Star Trek. And I don't know how effective of a job it was. I mean, the other actors, you look at, Maurice Evans and Kim Hunter, they do great jobs in those roles. But, Roddy McDowall, he was, a lot of those actors basically did they were like 1 or 2 and they're done. And Roddy McDowall, he was there for throughout the arc of those movies.
Yeah.
Which really kind of makes him the spine and the heart of it.
It's the distant future, 1991.
Yes, and that is one of those nice things.
Yeah.
There's a whole novelty when you watch the future, and for you, it's the past. And you sit there like, gosh, I don't quite remember that many ape servants.
I don't remember that part of history either.
Yeah. But you have those opening, with the opening credits, you get a sense of the transformation because as we're being introduced to the movie, we're in North America, 1991, and we're seeing groups of gorillas and chimpanzees being herded to a plaza where the apes are being trained in a variety of menial tasks. Now, this is a real tonal shift from the last movie, because with the last movie ended with the two surviving apes from who had come from the future, Cornelius and Zyra, who were killed, and their baby Milo, who was an infant, was the only survivor. So in the 18 years that have passed, there has been some sort of transformation to where now it is not just, a couple of apes who can walk and are very, human-like. It is now masses of them.
Yeah, that was a big question that my brother asked that I didn't know the answer to, of like, are these apes supposed to be anthropomorphic, or are they, like, are these just bad because of the technology at the time, representations of just normal apes? And I guess that answers the question.
There's an implication in the movie that there is kind of this, there's this breeding process to accelerate that. Mm-hmm. And you see that when Caeser is, you had the big announcement about how, 3 apes and a chimpanzee of exceptional ability are being selected for breeding. This is something that they've been working towards. I mean, the timeline is a lot more compressed than you might expect for that kind of thing. But this is something that has been working toward. That's one of the differences I thought was fascinating between the two movies that we'll get into in the crisscross. Mm-hmm. But after you see this, you see a helicopter landing on a rooftop, from which exits Armando, played by Ricardo Montalban. And I mean, for me, Ricardo Montalban was always Mr. Rourke, or he was, of course, Khan, and he plays very different characters. And this one's another example of that difference. And I don't know, I thought it was a pretty good performance.
No, yeah, he did a great job. I thought he showed a lot of range. Mm-hmm. In every scene that he did, there was something different. Mm-hmm. And I really liked his delivery too, especially when he was being questioned, mm-hmm. His vulnerability and mm-hmm. how he navigated through that as a person, as an actor. I'm like, oh, that's impressive. And
he also does such a great job of expressing compassion sincerely, and that really matters in terms of what he's doing in it. He has with him a chimpanzee named Caeser, played by Roddy McDowall. And they're going through security, and there's this very interesting exchange that Armando has with the security officers checking his papers. Armando, again, this is a reference to the previous film, is the one who basically rescues Milo, saves Milo at the end of Escape. And at the time, he had what was styled as Armando's Circus. What he is advertising now, 18 years in the future, he still has the circus, but now it's the old-time circus. Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that Armando is this connection to a time when apes weren't enslaved. He has been separate from the society. And they make reference to the fact that he's been in the provinces, whatever that is, and that he's basically been away from these centers where apes are now, enslaved. And working as menial labor in all these tasks. And Caesar is something of a novelty. They instantly remark upon the fact that he is not wearing the normal jumpsuits that the apes should be wearing, and that he has to have a special permit for this, which gives you a sense as to how regimented, regulated, authoritarian the society is. I mean, we're barely like 3 minutes into the movie, and there's already this sense that somehow in the 18 years that, North America is now a police state.
And the soldiers are basically wearing Nazi uniforms.
Yes.
They're just black and white. And,
yes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is in the contrast, of course, with the ones who manage the apes, they're wearing ones that look like those of like the state police. You know, they're wearing the tan uniforms with they're more traditional, but nonetheless, I mean, they're very much, you know, they're not those of just like your zoo handler. They're another form of police uniform.
But isn't this what humans do? We go back to our primitive ways when there's an apocalyptic event and we're like, we need order, we need structure. So we go to putting people in categories, or in this case, animals and humans in categories, and this, you serve us, we rule over you. There's superiority, complex, inferiority thing. We saw that in the slave trade. We saw up until that time in 1972, you know, we see the categories.
I like that McDonald references that at the end. That was really cool.
Yes.
We'll get there. But
Yeah, I mean, it's such a recurrent theme in the movie, that notion, and it's something that the writer was very conscious of. There was a very definite message of that in the movie, and it's so fascinatingly done. But of course, once they get through security, we discover that Caesar can talk, and this is something that becomes kind of it becomes early on a marker for what makes Caesar unique, what distinguishes him from the other apes, and how it's such a concern for the other authorities. They make it very clear early on that, like from this moment onward, you know, him speaking is an issue, and Armando has coached him to not do that in public, to not do that around other people. He's basically prepared him for this experience, which kind of makes you wonder why it is he brought Caesar in the first place.
I was thinking about that also. I was like, I don't know why you're there. What were we looking for? You know, you said earlier to bring people back to the circus, but
yes,
for what? Was he low on funds, or
does he really need Caesar to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
But
or did he secretly want to expose Caesar so that humanity can come to some sort of level playing field where they're being more compassionate to these chimpanzees and each other?
Or maybe it's that because he had to come back to the city with the circus, this was sort of a way of acclimating Caesar to what he had to get used to. And this gets again to what I thought was great acting from Roddy McDowall's. As they're going through the city distributing leaflets for the circus, you were seeing Caesar reacting to this world in which now exists. You see him watching apes being mistreated. I keep thinking of the scene where you have the female ape who's sitting down, she's exhausted, and she has the two
like parcels. It looks like she was just shopping.
Yeah,
is what I thought, but I guess not, because.
But she was taking a rest, and there was like, move. And they're prodding her with shock prods, and just to get her moving. But you also get a recap. We find out what's happened. What's happened is that in 1983 there was a expedition that was sent to outer space that came back that brought a virus that killed all the dogs and the cats. And what happened was, in its wake, people adopted apes as pets. And humans, when they discover, wow, these apes are really trainable, they start, they go very quickly from having them as beloved pets to having them as demeaned servants. And that's one of the comments they make periodically in the movie, which is how quickly that happened. And it's fascinating because it really underscores the indifference with which humans treat them. It's we focus upon the horror of the mistreatment, the abuse, the conditioning, but even when that's not there, you see these humans just treating apes as though they're furniture, they're tools.
It's been accepted at that point. You know, they've been inundated with this culture of master slave.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you have that point a little bit later on where you have the labor demonstration, and it's like humans are gradually losing these jobs to apes because
okay. Yeah, I was trying to at first I thought those were pro ape, and then I was looking at them like, okay, I couldn't read the signs fast enough, but
you get those announcements, the labor demonstration in the Central Plaza will be ending in 15 minutes. You know, you guys can gripe, but you know what? Apes are here to stay because they are just so darn useful.
And free.
But, you know, you do have, apes that are acting out. We see a group of guards beating and sedating a chimpanzee, and Caesar blurts out, "Lousy human bastards." And all of a sudden people are like, "What?" And Armando very quickly has to start covering for Caesar, because they think it's the chimpanzee, but maybe not. And Armando, he's very good at trying to say, "Oh, it was me." And there's then the ape that's being sedated begins to act up, so they have to go back to that. In the confusion, Caesar slips away, then Armando slips away. But very clear, it's obvious at this point they're very much in trouble.
Yeah. And the choices he made to cover up, the choice of being so worried that something bad's going to happen instead of being physical or trying to start an altercation. He's like, and it's the choice was just so perfect because it showed he's not in control.
Yeah, it's a very good suspense thing too.
Yeah.
It's another example of it's another demonstration for Armando's compassion, where he is willing to take the fall for Caesar. Now, obviously, it would mean something different for him than it would for Caesar. But nonetheless, he doesn't have to do that, but he chooses to. He is going to, and then he's brought before, of all people, the governor of the province, Breck, played by Don Murray. And he sits there and says, "I didn't say human bastards, I said inhuman bastards," which is, as the great, St. Francis says, we should be treating animals better and everything. And he's trying to sell this to try to cover for Caesar, but he still has to abandon Caesar. He says to Caesar, "I'll meet up with you later, but if not, there's these shipments of apes are brought in periodically. Try to integrate with them and blend it that way, because if you're by yourself, you will get caught." But we also discover through the interrogation how the governor is paranoid. There's this rising tide of disobedience among the apes. He is worried about the prospect of a speaking ape, and this is where you see the legacy of the last film, which is that what's established is Escape of the Planet of the Apes. Once they discover what the future holds, there's this determination to head that off, which is why Caesar, Cornelius and Zyra get killed at the end of the movie. And so now everyone's like on the alert for the speaking ape. At some point when the ape speaks, that's the tipping point. They're terrified will take place. And so Breck who's paranoid to begin with, he's not willing to believe Armando's very passionate admissions of guilt. And it's kind of funny how usually people, they're being interrogated, they're like, "I didn't do it. He's like, I did it. And like, "Well, we don't think so." Would all the authorities be so skeptical? So Caesar has to infiltrate a cargo of orangutans from Indonesia.
That's right.
I think I said Borneo.
Well, Borneo's
is that in?
Yeah.
Okay.
They kind of bounce back. There's like Borneo, for like Indonesia, formerly Borneo or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I was wondering where all the chimpanzees came from because they're not native to North America, right? So
what you're talking about is the slave trade.
Yeah,
They're bringing in chimpanzees, gorillas from Africa. They're bringing in orangutans from Indonesia, and that's what we're seeing is the 1991 slave trade.
Yeah,
where they're
I remember that.
Yeah.
Just
And so, he's processed, which means he's in the system.
Yep.
And then he goes to ape conditioning, and you get this horrifying depiction of how apes are trained for service. It's electroshock therapy. It's not therapy. It's electroshock conditioning. They do it with flamethrowers. And Caesar, and again, Roddy McDowell does such a great job. I mean, you only get a few glimpses of it, but you could tell he's it's not just that he's horrified. You could tell he's trying to hide the horror because he has to play dumb, literally. He has to say that he can't speak. He has to exert 10 times as much restraint now.
And the character, it shows the character's intelligence, right? The Caesar's intelligence of observing before acting.
Yeah.
Like, what can I do to help?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But he's also he's still holding out hope for Armando. Mm-hmm. So he's camouflage. He's blending in until he can figure out what happened to Armando and then reconnect with him. But Caesar, as much as he's trying, he can't help but be smart at what he does. That he is trained. They make this reference a little bit later, that he is so good in training that they don't have to condition him. And so he stands out from the first, which is why he's selected to inseminate a female chimpanzee.
Yeah. There's part of the training is they do there's this gag with the sink where the first ape kind of messes it up, and I can't remember what he does.
Wash his hands.
Yeah, he does it backwards. Like he does the towel first and then gets his hands wet and doesn't know what to do. And then he just comes in funny. And he's like, "Ooh, I do this and I do that," and he does it really quick.
He kind of does it in this. I always thought it was kind of a snotty way of oh yeah, this is so difficult.
Yeah.
But of course, this means that when he goes up for auction, he stands out. And so when all this is pointed out, Breck is attending the auction and the governor decides to buy him himself. So
yeah, I thought this was the most direct allegory to slavery with this, the slave trade.
Especially with the chains and the bidding.
Yeah.
So Caesar's taken to the governor's office where Breck's top aide, MacDonald, played by Harry Rhodes, teaches him how to make scotch and soda. And there's this great, it's fascinating where Caesar is facing off against the primary antagonist. And it's like Breck can tell that maybe this is the one, but he's not entirely certain. Or maybe he suspects that something's off. And there's that great scene where he's like, let's go ahead and let you name yourself like in the old way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And he just kind of says, shows him how to open the book and just point to a name. And
it's actually the dictionary, I think.
Was it the dictionary?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, open the dictionary, point to something. And so Caesar does that. And of course, he picks Caesar. And they read the definition, Caesar, a king. That foreshadowing of the role that Caesar's going to perform.
Yeah.
And then he decides that this ape, which is suspiciously smart, should be in the command post.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wasn't sure if they suspected him or not. Because, when they bought him off the thing, I'm like, oh no. And there's like that zoom into the governor as they do that. So I thought for sure, they suspect him. But then their interactions with him after that, they didn't seem to suspect at all. And I really don't know what direction they were going with that.
Yeah, like when they purchased him, I don't remember him, Caesar, doing anything in front of everyone to stand out other than just stay still, right? So like, what really did he see in Caesar sitting up there in the balcony that it was like, oh, let's get him.
It was the announcement of the auctioneer that this chimpanzee was so smart that he didn't need conditioning. That he basically was trainable, which
still a gamble to me. It's like, oh, the auctioneer says he's smart. Let's pay $15,000 for him. Like, I'm like, I don't know if my investment was gonna.
Well, he was probably, he was using public funds for that, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. Oh, we're just going to put this on the public tab. This is one being paid for by the state,
right?
But then he's right under their nose.
Yes, and
this would make great suspense if they played it that way. But I just didn't know which way they were playing it. So
it's like they couldn't decide.
Yeah.
Did they suspect him of being exceptionally smart? And it would have been nice if they just had a throwaway line. We tried to get the smartest because we want to keep those. I mean, you see periodic intimations of that, like the Achilles list, that they try to keep a special eye on all the apes that have been identified as troublemakers, and it makes perfect sense in that respect. Except that one, they never say it, and two, it's like we're going to take this troublemaking ape and put them where we run everything.
Yeah.
So listen in on all our conversations.
Yeah. It's something that I don't think they quite nail in this movie, which is the combination of the suspicion and arrogance that apparently exists in this future state, where they're not entirely, at least the leaders are not entirely trusting of the apes, but at the same time they are just so because you get that later on with that speech that Breck gives as the apes are breaking into the command post, which is like, how could they be doing this? Well, this is you were worried they were going to be able to do this. Why you were the last person who should be surprised?
Which my question with the suspicion thing, they had already believed that the parent's son was dead. So they were suspicious that these apes will rise up, or they were suspicious that the kid was actually alive?
It was a bit of both. Apparently what happened, this is something Armando alludes to in his initial interrogation, which is that because when Cornelius and Zaire were killed, the infant chimpanzee that was in the zoo was killed with them as a decoy. Mm-hmm. And Armando implies that afterwards they still went and tracked down every infant chimpanzee. Mm-hmm. And
it sounds very biblical.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And they raid Double Sure, and Armando apparently, addressed it at the time. But the fact that they did that implied that, and it's understandable, because what the news that Cornelius and Zaire brings back are, there's going to be a nuclear war. Apes are, humans are going to become animals, and the apes are going to rule the earth. And they're all thinking, what the heck? And you get that playback.
Okay, so no, that was from the previous movie.
Yes,
that's why. Okay.
And they're alluding to it.
I was a bit confused about that too.
Yeah.
The part where any part where they were explaining that part, but it's funny. There was a part where they're like, "Oh, we killed the wrong baby," and I'm like, are we the bad guys?
In case the ape slavery didn't tip that off. What's interesting is that McDonald serves this role in the story where he is the figure of what in the 60s and 70s would have been the white liberal, is that he is very sympathetic to the plight of the apes. And he seems to envision this future where apes and humans might be able to coexist. And it's something that it's nicely done in there. I mean, I could want more, but at the same time, I could see why they didn't want to dwell too much upon that. But he is so sympathetic towards the Caesar throughout it. Like from the moment where he's teaching Caesar how to mix drinks and all throughout, he's the one who is very,
not a horrible person.
Yeah, not a horrible.
Yeah, we even see that before Caesar shows up. And they kind of interact with another chimp that was coming up the stairs with the guards, and he mentions why you guys being so cruel to him.
And you see that implication is when the two guards are that's McDonald, the governor's top egg.
Yeah.
Why is he an ape lover? And he just says, "Why do you think?" And the fact that he's black.
I think I picked up on that.
Yeah,
I almost wrote a note.
So. But of course, not everyone on the governor's staff is so sympathetic, because we also have Chief Inspector Klopp, who's played by Severin Darden, and he comes into the interrogation with Armando. Oh, we're going to let you go. Just go ahead and sign this paper, and now we're going to bring in the authenticator, and it's apparently a truth device that also is a torture device. 1991's going swimmingly, people.
Yeah.
But they
again, not at all the 1991 I remember. Well, I was 2 years old at the time, so.
Oh, I make me feel so old. Well, let's just say that this is less wet than waterboarding, and a lot more effective apparently, because Armando starts to reveal that he's been lying, and yet rather than reveal the truth, he commits suicide. He is literally willing to die for Caesar, and he does. Mm-hmm. And because he is in the command post, Caesar hears the report about Armando's death, and it's just, again, Roddy McDowell just sells the anguish that Caesar feels. He's heartbroken, and he loses all faith in human kindness.
Well, he grew up with him, right? So he was raised by him. All his mannerisms came from Armando. Everything he learned and believes was from him.
You get that early in the film when Caesar first speaks to Armando. He's like, "Did I do all right?" And Armando cautions him on the mannerisms. Apparently, Armando had to teach him how to be more ape-like because for the reasons you just described. And so this is when Caesar decides we're going to have a revolution. And he starts, it's really neat that the montage we see is that he starts encouraging these very petty acts of rebellion. They throw down books, they light things on fire, but they also stockpile weapons. And I love how Caesar gets all these orders, which the apes aren't, supposed to be able to read, so nobody thinks twice about it.
Right.
So he's like, pick up one pistol for repair, add 100 rounds of ammunition, picking up half a dozen steaks, and a gallon of kerosene. And they're preparing for war. And it's brilliant because they're using their place in the system to acquire the tools to overthrow it.
Yeah.
They're accumulating the weapons, and it's because humans just assume that as smart as apes are getting, they just still can't do something like that.
And I feel like it was so advanced, like to gather a group of anybody and organize yourselves, go flank.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really, you have to train for that, like at least a couple of weeks, couple months maybe.
Yeah.
And they just did it kind of overnight. Like,
and he's speaking from experience, right? Like you were in the army.
Yeah. So yeah, we and even then when we learned it was like we all messed up. It was like, oh man, you got to redo it again, do it again.
Yeah.
So they were just able to, which I guess shows their intelligence to be able to out of nowhere organize themselves in columns, rows, or whatever, and then somebody's on the roof making a signal, do this, do that, and it's working.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things you don't get in this part of the film is a sense of the timeline.
Right.
How long is it taking for them to do this? It feels like it's just a few days.
Yeah, the other thing about this, and it might be because I'm spoiled by the other movie, and I guess we're splitting sides here, but the way that he turns the other apes to his side, I think a lot of stuff is skipped over. I'm like, okay, where did he meet all these apes? They're just suddenly a whole group of apes that I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Especially when they make it clear through the overhead announcements, which are a nice way of kind of filling you in on what's happening in the world, is that the police are supposed to disrupt any gatherings of more than just like 2 or 3 apes. Yeah, for sure. To prevent that.
Because I thought that's where it was going in the prison, especially after that scene where the other apes try to steal his banana, and then he just gives out little pieces to each of them. And I thought that was like, oh, this is the first little spark of leadership, and then he's gonna gradually grow into a leader.
Yeah, you're right. There weren't too many interactions where he could develop trust amongst people who would follow, or the apes who would follow him.
I guess part of it might be just the ape costumes. They all look pretty much the same, because even him, like, I got confused sometimes because, oh, this is the one we're following, it must be him.
I would say, but also, like, again, they look all the same, so it's like, and they're suffering the same way. So when one of them rises, they're like, oh, let's get behind him, because who else is going to do it? And he's finally somebody's doing it, so I wasn't brave enough to do it. He is. Let's follow him.
It's how I think that banana scene's. I skipped over it, but it is, I think, a very important scene in the sense that it's establishing how he becomes an alpha, and it's interesting how this is. I think about the contrast with or the comparison with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where there's a certain amount of force and intimidation involved. Caesar in this film does it through compassion. He's showing them how to share, how they don't have to fight; they can cooperate and collaborate, and that is something that the chimpanzees seem to pick up on immediately. But they definitely gloss over a lot of the whole, reaching out, because he doesn't actually have to reach out to the chimpanzees; he also has to reach out to the gorillas and the orangutans as well. Although it's interesting, you don't see many orangutans in this movie. They're very visible in the first 2 movies. They're in the 5th movie. You see a few scenes with orangutans, both the Borneo scene, and then you see a few of them in the ape management scene when Caesar enters there. But other than that, it's mostly just gorillas and chimpanzees. I think that might have been a cost-saving measure because they.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
So. And I was maybe it was just my eye. I could barely tell the difference between the gorillas and the chimpanzees. I was like, which one is which?
Well,
I know they were there, but
the biggest difference was the gorillas had red jumpsuits and the chimps had green ones. But and then of course the orangutans are orange. And
that of course goes to why the fact that at the beginning of the movie, the fact that he wasn't wearing a jumpsuit was such a matter of note. Apparently, it's very important in terms of distinguishing the groups easily. So, but because Caesar came in with a shipment of orangutan, that becomes notable. And I remember when I was watching him, it's been years since I last saw it, and I saw one chimpanzee and orangutans, and I'm thinking they've got to notice that. And of course, initially the guy's like, it reminded me of that scene in Trading Places, well, one gorilla, two gorilla. It's like, who cares? Mm-hmm. but it turns
Actually,
out.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I just thought of something. Go finish your thought. Sorry.
I was going to say, but it turns out that's how they figure out who Caesar is, because Klopp goes to the records and finds out, well, this chimpanzee came from Indonesia, and we know for a fact there are no chimpanzees in Indonesia.
No, I was thinking like it's kind of I don't know why this thought came in my head. It was like how Europeans saw Africans. It wasn't individual. Mm-hmm. It was you're all the same. Even to this day, it's like, oh, we go to Africa instead of the different countries and then tribes and then dialects and languages that are intricate to each or complex to each civilization in that part of the world. But and it's kind of the same here, where it's like, oh, you're all the same, even though you guys have your own differences with gorillas, apes, bonobos, chimpanzees, etc. Flat out, you're all one.
It's interesting because you have that distinction is made more clearly in the first two movies, where the different apes play different roles. The gorillas are the soldiers, the chimpanzees are the scientists, the orangutans are the religious figures. Yeah. And whereas here, they're all kind of thrown together. Gorillas, chimpanzees, they kind of all perform the same basic tasks. And maybe Caesar was exploiting that a little bit, but clearly they're aware of the distinctions enough to where they can say this was a chimpanzee, wasn't where he should be, so therefore he becomes suspicious. And then the governor's like, we had him under our noses all along. And they very quickly track him down. And I like this. I mean, I think about how so often it was so easy to say, have him staying what have, but they catch him. They're like, and there's that great scene where initially they're he's in ape management, so they call down. McDonald picks up the phone, and he lets Caesar off.
Yeah, I love this scene between McDonald and him. Like you can see the look, and this is very subtle acting, and it is, I guess it's harder to do in Ape Mask. Is you can see in his eyes when Caesar starts to trust this guy. He's like, first he starts to take him outside on the phone. He's like, oh, he's off on an errand. He'll come back. And he has this look of like, okay, maybe he's on my side. And then there's another moment in the hallway that I forget, but he has the same look again. And so he's got his trust by that point. And that's, he
trusts him enough to speak in front of McDonald.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that shows how McDonald doesn't really appreciate who Caesar is until that moment, where he's like, I couldn't believe. And then you have a fascinating conversation, which is a parallel of the famous distinction between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, with McDonald playing the King role and Caesar playing the Malcolm X role. Because McDonald's trying to convince him that not all humans are bad, that it is possible to build bridges, and Caesar's like, maybe a few, but it's not enough. That we are not going to be able to build anything. It has to be revolution. And even after hearing that, McDonald says go, and lets Caesar get away. But then Caesar's caught in a roundup of the unaccompanied apes, and he is subjected to torture, electroshock, and with the governor present, he, reveals he can talk, and the governor's like, "You got him."
Yeah, and this is an interesting parallel to Rise, which I won't go too into right here, but we'll see. I'll just say that I think Rise did it better, but I don't think that's what they were going for in this movie. But there's a really cool moment in Rise that we'll get to. So
they've confirmed who Caesar is. They've confirmed that he is the ape child of Cornelius and Zyra. And once they've done all this, they decide they're going to kill him, and they're going to kill him in the laziest way possible, which is that they're going to just keep him on the table and turn it up to 11. And then McDonald saves Caesar. Now, this is the point where I'm kind of like, so did the electroshock start and McDonald stopped it, or did McDonald stop it just before and Caesar kind of figured out he should play along?
Yeah, that was kind of unclear. Yeah.
I thought it was my problem because I actually, when that scene was going on, I went to the kitchen to do something. and I was like, what happened? My wife was like, McDonald took off the power. That was her take. So
well, he did. The question is, did he do it?
Yeah.
Before?
Did he do it before the shock reached Caesar, or did he kind of interrupt it, and then they just assumed that he was dead?
And it's interesting you say that because I missed it too. Because I watched. It's weird. I watched it on a Plex, and I looked at. It was very choppy, and I'm like, "What is happening?"
Mm-hmm.
And I looked. It was 30 minutes long, and I'm like, "What? What is this?" There's a bunch of clips from the movie, and they had that scene, but they cut out the part where he turns off the power, and I'm like, "How did he survive that?"
Yeah.
Because McDonald did leave the room, right? Yeah,
he did. And afterward, they're kind of like, "Well, where did McDonald go?" He just stormed off, and it's kind of like, "Oh yeah, he's too squeamish for this kind of thing." But then he shows up, and they think everything's okay. But Caesar now has a chance to escape, and once he escapes, the revolution is on. And this gets to the real questionable part about
it's on very quick.
Exactly,
like just
very quickly, very well coordinated.
A shot of
they can use a knife, they can use on weapons. They're just going.
Yeah, I mean, like it goes from him escaping the place to instantly apes running out of the darkness. It's like, where did all these apes come from?
And it's not just
I don't know.
And it's not just the apes that are working in the city. It's also the apes in ape management who haven't been fully conditioned or haven't even been conditioned, and somehow they know what to do too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it points to the threat that Breck identified, which is the fact these apes are getting intelligent. But there's a difference between being smart and being well trained.
Well trained is big difference.
Yes, but Breck, in some ways, this is what Breck has been wanting, which is a confrontation with the apes. And so he mobilizes the security forces, and then you get about 10-15 minutes of scenes that are directly emulating what people were seeing on their TV in the 1960s. The scenes from places like Watts and Newark and Detroit of police attacking rioters, police attacking protesters. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the apes are swarming into the city, and the police are showing up. They've got their shields, they've got their batons, they've got their guns. And you would think that this is an uneven matchup, but the apes have numbers. They're better trained than the humans are expecting. The scene, the first encounter that you were describing, which is where they charge the humans gun them down, and the apes do the whole going over the buildings. And then later on, you have the next cordon where the humans are lined up, and I love the guys with the bullhorn. No, and the apes are still coming.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't tell you how annoying that was. Every time I heard that.
Well, no. The best part was annoying to the governor. He's like, why don't they just shoot the apes? Stop trying to reason with them. And then, of course, it turns out that's a trap that the apes have set because they've saturated the place with kerosene. So then they break through the humans' cordons and they enter the governor's command post. And this is like, Adolf Hitler, April 1945. They're storing the bunker, and Breck cannot just can't believe how it is that the apes are doing this. I mean, you don't go to war thinking you're going to lose. He's pretty confident that he can nip this in the bud. Instead, the apes have swept through his men, and they're cutting down the door. They're not pounding on it like animals. They've got an acetylene torch and they're cutting it through. And
where do they get that from?
Right.
Where they get that from?
Exactly.
A lot of these weapons, I know some of them, where they got them from, but then others, I'm like,
suddenly they have guns at some point, but it's really cool. But I don't know where they got them.
You see the scene with the acetylene torch. When he's accumulating the weapons, they get that. And by that point, in the Conquest, they've picked up the weapons from the humans. Mm-hmm. So they've been picking up the shotguns, and at one point, Breck's like, "Oh my God, they're armed." And to his, although he doesn't mention this as well, they know how to use these weapons too. So, but go ahead.
No, it's just because
where was that part of the training?
It's frustrating to me, like in the army, because you're trained how to shoot, how to hold a weapon properly, and they're just aiming from the hip essentially, which is amateur or however they're going and they're hitting. Like, you know how hard it is, especially moving. It's not easy.
The impression I got from the way this was shot is that the implication is that there's a lot that the apes are winning in part because of numbers. They're
overwhelming,
just swarming the humans, and they're taking casualties. It's one of the parts of it that, and this goes to one of my minor grievances with Price, which is that you see the casualties the apes are taking. The apes are losing numbers, and I like how when it goes back to when they encounter the first cordon, and the humans have the M16s, and they gun down the apes, and the survivors flee, and Caeser comes across that, and he's horrified. Again, Roddy McDowall doing such a great job in conveying that, and the sense that losses are being taken, and he's feeling each one of them. Mm-hmm. But he also seems to understand that you're going to have casualties in war. And I also like how, as they're breaking in, Breck orders the apes that are still in the command center to be shot. It's like he's still committing atrocities, up to the very end. Again, very Nazi-esque,
I mean, that's a dictator for you, right? Yeah. It's somebody who wants to hold on to power, and they don't know what else to do besides just kill everything that moves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So.
But they break in. There's a fight between the humans and the command post and the apes. The apes win. Breck is subdued, and Caeser confronts him. And there's that great exchange between Caeser and Breck, where Caesar's basically asking, "Why do you do it?" And Breck's like, we look at you, we see ourselves, but you guys are the savages. I didn't write it down, but it so enrages him that Caesar has the apes drag him outside, and the apes are prepared to beat him to death. And then you have that final exchange between McDonald and Caesar, where McDonald's trying to urge Caesar to stop. He's saying that, this is not the way. This is not the way you should be doing it. And Caesar gives this great speech where he basically is pledging bloodshed. He's pledging revolution, and he's pledging conquest until Lisa.
I love this part.
Yes. Yeah.
And this has an pre-echo, I guess, of what happens, and she says no.
Yes.
And
she's a female ape, and there's been a hint of an attraction between the two of them throughout the movie. She's been working in the command center. She survives the executions. But she speaks. And the thing is, of course, is significant because she's the first ape other than Caesar to speak.
Yeah.
And Caesar hears this, and
as annoying as the nose through the bullhorn, where I think that's the setup for that.
Yeah.
That's how she learned. That's why that's her first word, because she's heard it a million times.
And Caesar, basically has been conditioned by love, and he's kind of like, okay, we're going to have compassionate rule over humanity on what is now going to be a planet of the apes. And what's fascinating about that, and this is why you're very fortunate, Aaron, is that that scene wasn't there in the beginning.
Yeah, I saw that in the trailer, part of that speech, and I'm like, I don't know about this. And I saw it in the movie, and he seemed very vengeful, and I'm like, yeah, if this is what it is, I don't know if I'm on board. And then McDonald's speech, I don't know if that was a pickup or not, but that I really like that part. I think he started off by saying, I come from an ancestry of slaves, and so that's how I know. And then this reminds me of Look Who's Coming to Dinner. There's a great line in there that he's like, this was in the 60s, I think, of like, you didn't do this back then. He's talking to his dad, and he's like, you see yourself as a black man. I see myself as a man. And it's, I don't know, just little touches that you can get. Like it's one thing to have the allegory of it in there, but it's another thing to like actually say it in some way in the movie.
Yeah. And the fact that you like that, I think is what, the test audiences in 1972 said, because that was not in the movie. Originally, it ended with Breck being beaten to death. Yeah. And there was no amending speech. It ended with revolution. And I
was going to say that I like that they didn't go that direction of beating him to death, because where's the hope? Because the movie is a roller coaster of hope, right? Hope in humanity or lack thereof, right? So them not beating him was perfect, because it showed the humanity in the ape.
Even though the way it had to put it together was a little choppy.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, to me, I agree. I like that ending. At the same time, though, it's a little false to the fears of the time that were part of that metaphor that the movie's about, which was there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of, I would argue silly anxiety, but anxiety nonetheless about, the possibility of race war. And that's what Caeser promised at the end of the original cut, that people, I think, rejected for the very reason of the two you described. There was no hope. There was no sense that we can possibly work it out.
Well, to go back to your metaphor you were saying of Caesar being Malcolm X and McDonald being Martin Luther King, I guess it took that route of the love over the. I like that. Yeah, I'm much more of an MLK fan than.
You got to remember. I got to remember too that segregation, or that wasn't the civil rights had just kind of ended. They were still struggling, of course, but what 68.
Yeah, it's true.
When interracial marriage was just legalized.
That was like, I think 65.
65
was Loving v. Virginia.
It was around the corner. It was not too far off. So,
and that's one of the things that I think about as I look at McDonald, which is that he's a man in his early 40s, would you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and his character would have been, in his late teens, early 20s during the civil rights movement. Yeah, and it's never said it's something that
Are you doing that math from the 1991 or
from 1991?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes
so
sense.
You figure if he's go ahead.
No, as I say, I was actually, and I was talking about when the film was made versus when the film was set. So
I was talking about something slightly different, which is how McDonald sort of is carrying that experience. Of what that was like and how that inspires him. He's trying to basically take that and encourage that hope. And in the final cut, he does end up selling Caesar on that vision. And that becomes part of the fifth film, but we're not covering the fifth film today.
All the Planet of the Apes movies started popping up on my channel now. I'm like, I guess I gotta watch all of them.
Your channel. Yeah. That's funny.
Which I probably will when I get home to.
Well, have you seen the newer ones?
I've seen some of them, but it's been a while, so I got to rewatch.
Oh, okay. Dawn is my favorite by far. But anyway.
Which one was that one?
That was the second one.
That's the second one.
And I gotta say, that's my first beef. Is that the titles of the original series make so much sense to me, and yet you have Dawn, Rise. I suppose that we should be fortunate the third film wasn't the beginning. It's the same darn title. But I guess we're moving on to talk about Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Well, one more joke before. Not that we were saying jokes, but kind of didn't. Anyway, but as the credits were rolling, I'm like, you and I remember 1991 very differently. Anyway, but
90s Nickelodeon cartoons. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's one of the things I so love doing is just watching those films that are set in what was in the future. Just see, it's just to me, it's one of the things I love about science fiction, which is really at its core, it's just they're doing path development. They're taking their issues, their views, their ideas, and just projecting them into some sort of future. And it's never going to turn out like that, but it's just so fascinating to think what they thought our life was going to be like.
Yeah.
So
that was our review of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Now our review of Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Now, I don't know how much we're going to want to go into this, but there are so many callbacks in this film to the original series.
Yeah, there is.
And it starts with the very first scene. You have this sweeping overhead shot of this lush jungle that pans down to this group of chimpanzees who are minding their own business. And suddenly this group of men storm them, rush in, capture them in nets. This is a very close echo of the original Planet of the Apes scene where the apes storm the field and capture the humans. One of the captured chimpanzees is called Bright Eyes. Again, call back to the original movie because that was the name that Zyra gave Charlton Heston's character, Taylor. But she's in a lab where she is acing an intelligence test. And the scientist who's supervising this, Dr. Will Rodman, played James Franco's character, takes the results to his supervisor, Stephen Jacobs, played by David Oyelowo, excuse me. I meant to look that one up. Oyelowo. And
sorry, by the way, I know that guy.
Oh, you do? Oh, really?
Yeah. We used to go to church together.
Cool.
Back in LA, and I got the privilege of going to his house and meeting some other people a couple times. So he's a cool guy, man.
I hope he got a nice big check for this movie.
He probably did.
He deserved it.
His house is nice.
I mean, I've got issues. I'm about to start going to, but I mean, the acting in this film is pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's, especially when you consider that so much of it is against, CGI.
Yeah. And the CGI is amazing. Like, ironically, I think it's better when it's closer to them than it is when they're full body, like running through the jungle.
Yeah.
But Will is just excited that he has this result. He has one result, and he wants to jump right into human tests, which to me is like, aren't you moving a little fast, buddy? I mean, how do we know this is not the exception?
I also had a problem with that.
Yeah. This is where I start to wonder exactly which diploma mill gave him his PhD and whatever he's a PhD in, biochemistry, whatever.
Yeah, this is movie timing.
Yes, exactly. So, but it's one that I think, I mean, there's an explanation in the movie that I think works, although they never make it explicit, but nonetheless, it does kind of set the stage for the fact that Will Rodman is not the most ethical of scientists.
No. Yeah.
So, this is where I had to learn about the concept of the anti-villain and how. And I texted you this, Aaron, when I started watching. It's like, he's the villain of the piece, right? And I realized the anti-villain is more appropriate because his intentions are good and sincere. It's just that he is doing so many bad things.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that I admired about this movie, not the inaccuracies, but just there's no real villain. Well, until we get to, the boss of the company, and the guys that run the ape shelter. Yes. But they, like, kind of the villain is just these happenstances that just things go the worst they possibly can go.
Which I feel like you can see how films in general just transition from having a clear-cut black and white villain hero to like more our everyday experiences and what causes us to make the choices we make in our everyday lives. And we're not bad, but we just don't make the best decisions because of our circumstances.
Yeah, it's kind of a cautionary tale type thing, kind of like a Jurassic Park type thing.
And I think that's one of the things that distinguishes this movie in some ways from Conquest. It's just that to have a person who's supposed to be very smart and very well educated who nonetheless ignores the basic lessons of his profession in his rush to do good, especially when he keeps getting kind of clapped back throughout the entire movie by events. It's like these things should be telling him something, but they don't until it's far, far, far too late. So there, Will Rodman and Stephen Jacobs are doing the presentation to the board, and they're like, we're having this great, success with ALZ 112, which we can cure Alzheimer's, we can fix, all these things. It's going to be this miracle drug. We're all going to be, so rich, we're going to be able to, crash yachts into each other, something like that. Yeah. And apparently they're going to bring Bright Eyes to the board. Why? I don't know. But as the handlers are trying to draw out Bright Eyes, she goes on a rampage. And she goes tearing through this building, and I was going to say she goes ape crap. I love, there's a cut in this where I like the ironic cutting. They do this a couple times where he's like, you'll see when we bring her in, and then cut to her smashing through a wall. Yeah. And then she ultimately she breaks in the boardroom. Yeah. And then she's shot to death by a guard. Will Rodman's going, no. It's like, why would they? Oh, well, geez, shoot out the place, about to threaten the board. But I'll hold off if you say so. He also says it after the guard's already pumped 2 or 3 bullets into Bright Eyes. And Jacobs' reaction, I think, is totally understandable. which is the project is terminated. And that's the board's decision. Jake was like, you know what? They're not wrong. That this is not what we were doing. And he orders the chimpanzees euthanized. And so they euthanize the other chimpanzees, but as they're cleaning out the lab, one of the handlers, Robert Franklin, this is Tyler Levine's character, discovers an infant chimpanzee in Bright Eyes' cage. And he brings this to Will's attention, and they're like, oh, this is why she was freaking out. She was being protective. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this guy is possibly a primatologist, at the very least an experienced animal handler, you would think. He never noticed that the chimpanzee was pregnant. It's probably like, oh, wow, I guess she's putting on a lot of weight. Hey, she's lost a lot of weight suddenly. Oh, wait, it was a pregnancy.
I guess you can argue that the drug accelerated the process.
Maybe. I mean, I oftentimes, I usually don't have a problem with having to kind of, read things into the movie to kind of connect things. But I feel like I was doing it way too often in this movie. So, but, and then of course you get this scene where, he has to euthanize the infant, but he says, he does this guilting thing, I've already euthanized 12 chimpanzees. I can't do it because I'm so compassionate. So here, you can do it. And he hands him the syringe of Drano or whatever they were using. And of course, and he says, I can't take him home because, my brother's security guard, he'll out me instantly. So I need you to take, the infant home, and then I'll find some provision for her. So, okay, we have this infant in a lab where they've been testing experimental chemicals, and not only does the infant live, which is an understandable choice, but they're going to take her out of the controlled environment, the infant out of the controlled environment into the real world. This is again where I'm starting to say, like, yeah, Will Rodman is not the best scientist. And he very quickly discovers why. But we also discover why it is he's so passionate and so motivated to push forward, because he takes the infant chimpanzee home to was a very nice home that he lives in with his father, Charles, played by the John Lithgow, and what I think is the single best performance in this movie. He does such an amazing job of portraying this man who is suffering from Alzheimer's.
He's got the most empathetic face of anybody.
He does, and he plays the the confusion, the frustration so well.
Yeah,
and you're introduced very early on. You see that he was a former music teacher. Apparently, he was beloved for what he did, but he is no longer the man he was, and he is living with his son with the help of a caretaker, and that becomes very important later on. The next morning, his father's trying to, he's having an episode, and he's trying to find his keys so he can drive somewhere. And to distract him, Will says, well, why don't you go ahead and feed the infant chimpanzee? And the chimpanzee's feeding himself. And all of a sudden, Will's now suddenly interested in the chimpanzee. Clearly, there is something different about this chimpanzee. So, does he take the chimpanzee back to the lab for testing? No. Does he do something to isolate the chimpanzee because it is something different? It possibly a result of this experimental drug that nobody knows the long-term effects of? No. He decides to let the chimpanzee live in the house for the next 3 years.
I think this is really interesting structurally wise. It would be, I'd have to break this down. I wasn't thinking about it as I was watching it, but Caeser is the main character. And he may not even appear until this might be the end of Act 1, or at least 15 minutes in, halfway through Act 1. And it's interesting. It's like you'd think that James Franco is the main character, but it's almost the inciting incident is the appearance of the main character.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting take.
And that actually clarifies a couple things, because it seems like so much of it, and this kind of is one of the things that bugged me about the film fundamentally. So much of this film seemed to be about they needed to get the plot from point A to point B, and it didn't matter if it didn't make sense. James Franco seems less of a character and more of a plot device.
He is, yeah. He's all the things that need to happen for us to get quickly to a Planet of Apes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all the humans really are. I think about the vet. Frida Pinto's character, who is just so criminally underused in this movie.
You're right.
She's supposed to be a vet. She's and they use her in certain ways. At one point, she's like, okay, you know, when she finds out, who Caesar is, she's like, excuse me, this is wrong, and Will's like, no, it's all so important, and that's it. That's the last we hear of it. She has these doubts, but she's expressed them, and now she goes back to this, this secondary role, enabling Will, whose role in the movie is to enable Caesar.
Not enough conflict.
There's an interesting scene early on when this might be the first scene with Caesar and the dad, or James Franco's dad. He's teaching her sign language, and that gave me like a memory flash, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? It reminded me of my sister learning sign language when she was a kid, because she has Down syndrome, so she wasn't able to speak for a lot later than normal kids are, and so I just remember the sign language for cheese, which is if you put your hands together like this, and anyway, it's, I don't know, I thought that was cool, and then I thought I had another point with this. By far, I think that Caesar's arc in this movie is just masterful. The machinations that they used to get there may be questionable, but
that's what bugged me. It was so frustrating, because it kind of felt like it's, and this is where you think of the fundamental difference between these two movies. Conquest is the fourth movie, and it's filling in this timeline that has been established, but the events themselves have not. And so we already know what's going to happen. We already know where we're going. We're learning how to get there. And whereas this film, it's about they know they know where they want to go, and they don't seem to care how they get there, so long as they're there by the end. Mm-hmm. And it's just again, it's so frustrating. But we get the first time jump. It's 3 years later. Caesar is a part of the family. He's got a room of his own. It's even been wallpapered nicely. And as we hear in the voiceover, he has cognitive skills that far exceed those of a human counterpart because of the exposure to ALZ-112. But as Caesar is getting smarter and advancing, Will's father, Charles, is getting, his condition is deteriorating. And there's this, the scene where he has an episode, and the caregiver, says this is no way for him to live, and I'm thinking she's right. And this gets to another thing about Will that's bugged me so much, is that he is so selfish in this movie. Again, you can't fault him that he wants to help his dad get better. He wants to be there for his dad. He doesn't want to put his dad in a home. And yet he can't make all of that work.
Well, that's the thing again about creating a film in the 2000s is it's what are humans doing in their circumstances that are given, and I felt like they did a good job of showing what people would probably do in this situation. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, and I would have enjoyed if there had been some sort of confrontation with that. But instead, what Will does is he decides, well, I'm going to go ahead and ignore, basic ethical protocols, smuggle this drug out of the lab, and inject my father with it. I mean, for all he could have...
I thought they put him in a desperate place. Like, as far as it... I wasn't thinking about, like, the proper procedure of scientific research when I was watching it, but just from a character point of view and just... being desperate, I think that would be the point in time he would do that.
And I can see that, but it's also at the same time I'm thinking about, because what happens later in the movie is that, for all he knows, injecting his father with ALZ-112 could have been the precipitating event, that his father could have been suddenly, breathing out, ALZ spores or something. I mean, he doesn't know what is happening here. He's running all these risks, and he's doing so in such a fundamentally reckless way. And it's like...
Okay, I don't mean to dig on you right here.
No, feel free.
I'm just going to use it as an opportunity to I mean, because I don't know. To, like, people that see plot holes in movies, okay, one thing you don't take into account is the fallibility of a human person. Mm-hmm. Like, this is... they did it the right way, the way they could have with this. This is when he would have done that. Of his dad is like, I think they put in the time thing of like, he's got like a week or a month or something. Like he doesn't have the time to go through all the proper ethical protocols with this. Like he's either going to give this to his dad or just watch his dad die. Yeah.
I mean, this gets to something I was going to bring up in Criss, which is one of the fundamental differences of two movies is that the society in Conquest destroys itself because of its choices. In Rise, humanity is destroyed because the rules are violated. Mm-hmm. There's ways to do this to keep humanity safe, and Will's choices and actions basically bring about the destruction. It's not just him. We have some other things that happen that we'll get to, but it's is the Planet of the Apes rises in Conquest because of humanity. In Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it happens despite humanity.
Okay, I'm not arguing for Will to be the hero of the
I
story.
know you're not.
He's not at all. Like he's genuinely like he's a cautionary tale, if anything.
He's
like
the antidote.
Like he may seem validated in each little choice that he's made, but he makes each little step closer and closer to hell as he gets there.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's excellent. It's like he's doing short steps. Each step on itself is understandable, but it's just it's like at any point if he had just been a bit more ethical, a bit less emotional, perhaps humanity would not have ended up the way that they do in Dawn, Kingdom.
Yeah,
but then we wouldn't have the movies, right?
That's true.
He did the right thing. Good, movie's over.
I just can think of other ways in which they could have gotten there without having it happen with such a. Like I said, it was frustrating. I felt like it was a writer who was kind of like, okay, we got to get to the point where the apes are speaking and the humans are dying, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense or not. I thought there's other ways it could have done. But anyhow,
we could also play on the age and play on the greed of the business owner. Let's get this done. Let's get this done.
And the choice is validated first because next morning there's Charles playing a song on the piano, and Will is so excited he doesn't notice he's so his dad, he's taking his blood pressure, talking about these tests, he doesn't notice that Caeser has gotten out. Caeser, who is largely confined to the house, he sees the neighbor's kids playing
that's right
in the street, and so he goes out to play with them. He goes and sees goes to their garage where the bike is, and when Will realizes that Caesar's got out, he and his dad go out to find him, and they see that that Caesar's being attacked by their neighbor Douglas, played by David Hewlett.
This guy.
Yeah, it's understandable though, like where he's coming
exactly.
from.
Everything that happened to him, I was happy. I was like, okay, good.
But it's like if as a dad, if I see this chimpanzee not native to San Francisco,
right?
Suddenly going around my kids, I'm going to probably flip out a little bit too.
I get that.
I mean, he's a jerk, but his motivations I actually understand a little bit better than Will's throughout the movie.
But in general, you'll a chimp that looks like, because there's different kinds, right? But a chimp that looks like him, you don't really, I don't think in society we look at it as dangerous. That particular breed, right?
If you know the breeds, but okay. I mean,
it's kind of the question though of what would happen like if you suddenly see a chimp with your kids. Like, I don't know.
Or to give you another example, let's say you see a tarantula on your kid's arm. Now, if you know something about spiders, that they generally they generally don't like humans in the sense, and not in the sense of they're at war with humans, but in the sense that they run from humans. Yeah. They're not going. But you see a tarantula, you're like ick. You have a just instinctive reaction. Reason doesn't kick in. And with Douglas, you have that. He's a dad. You never see his wife, so maybe he's a single dad. and he suddenly sees this chimpanzee who it's never established if he knows Caesar's living in the house before then.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean maybe not, but all of a sudden, Caesar's where he shouldn't be, and uninvited, and he doesn't know that Caesar's smarter than his kids. He just is there. There's this ape in my house, lunging after my kids. He freaks out. But he enters Caesar. Will take Caesar to the zoo for treatment, and this is where we get the beautiful veterinarian, Caroline, Frida Pinto's character, and we have the nice this nice little meet cute. They go to the Muir Woods so Caesar can stretch and roam, and I really love how that transition they do.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
Yeah,
just him climbing up through the trees, and like you've got the weather changes and lighting changes as he's jumping through, so it's clear it's different times, and he's getting bigger. Yeah. And then we get to the top of the trees as he's overlooking San Francisco, and it says 5 years later. Boop boop boop.
So for the next 5 years, we're kind of at a static point where Charles is responding well to the ALZ's treatment. Caesar is beginning to approach adulthood, and Will and Caroline have this very comfortable relationship, just living with him now.
Okay, real quick, we missed a very important moment here. As they leave the woods, they have the encounter with the dog that's barking at them, and they're like,
"Oh yeah,
oh, is that a chimp?" And then they walk by, and then as he gets in the car, there's the subtle thing of he doesn't want to get in the back. Mm-hmm. He gets in the front, mm-hmm. and then he signs, and I love how they do the signing here of just without doing subtitles or anything, what he's saying because of his responses. Mm-hmm. And he's like, is Caesar a
pet?
Is Caesar a pet? No. Yeah. And he's like, is Caesar human? And he's like, oh, like he's just realized he's not his actual son. He's something else.
It's like when he's Caesar's now a teenager and he's asking all those awkward questions.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And this is going forward through the movies, you can see it. That's probably why he's kind of the balance between humanity and apes, because he grew up thinking he was a human, mm-hmm. and now he suddenly learns that he's something else. And he has to learn what that is in the sequence with him in the ape cages.
It's the same role that Caesar plays in Conquest, but it's framed differently.
Yeah,
there's no denying that he's a chimpanzee and everything. That we don't really see that, but it's clear that he's recognizing that role. But here it is more of you see that process of discovery.
And it starts at ground zero for mm-hmm. this one, and then they go up from there. And Will, to his credit, he's very honest about it. He takes him to Genesis or whatever the company's called, and he tells the story, and of course he's explaining the story. Caroline's there, and apparently she didn't skip on her ethics classes in her training because after they go home she's like, explain this to me, because she's mm-hmm. And this is where I would have loved if she had been like the ethical compass in this movie, because mm-hmm. it seemed like she was just about to have that role.
Was this and the time frame was 5 years, right?
Yes.
And so they've been together. Will and so like nothing was picked up in this time frame where you're like, why is he so smart?
Yeah. Well, they kind of hand wave that away early on when he first takes her to his house so she could see how Caesar lives, and he says very disingenuously, good genes, I guess. Yeah. But now it turns out, well, with a bit of biochemical tinkering.
Because that would have been the movie's long, but that would have been a good way for them to show their relationship.
Yes.
You didn't tell me this. How long have we known each other? Something like that.
Exactly. And there were so many ways that they could have really done that, would have made them faster. But it gets, I think, to Aaron's point, which is that at the end of the day,
it's really Caesar's movie.
It's Caesar's movie, and Will's just a plot device.
Yeah.
And Caroline's a plot device for a plot device. It's frustrating because had they addressed that more, I think I would have been more comfortable with it. With what Will's doing, it was just frustrating to see how he would just kind of, as long as it's working for my dad, everything's okay and everything's harmonious. But then it's not, because we start to see signs that the ALZ 112 is not as effective as it used to be.
Oh, by the way, wouldn't it be illegal to experiment on your own?
Yeah,
Parent
all
without
that stuff
consent.
would be illegal. Yeah.
Exactly. It goes back to how all these ethical breaches, all these protocols being broken. But as long as everything's working out great, but then once the Alzheimer's starts to recur, and again, this is where it gets frustrating because Will sees this and he does nothing. So now he's in a situation where his father is having this relapse of Alzheimer's, and he just leaves his father at home with Caesar. Which is why Charles, he has an episode. He's like, I'm going to go outside. Oh, there's a car. Oh, for some reason, the keys are in it.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is it open with the keys?
Yeah.
It's a nice car too.
Oh, yeah. It was Douglas's car. So Douglas apparently leaves his car unlocked with the keys because he's just
asking
get in the
for
car.
it.
He starts it because he's backing. He goes forward. He backs up and so this is where it's Douglas is being kind of a jerk, but again I don't think he knows what's happening with Charles.
Yeah,
that Charles is having an episode, and
this is a perfect little microcosm of what I'm talking about with this movie. Like it's just the worst case little things that just happen of like, oh, this is the worst way this could have happened.
Yeah.
And that's a great writing thing. If things are going well for your characters, it's not a great story. But anyway, but just the fact that he's in the car, that he has Alzheimer's, and it is the jerk neighbor's car, and it's just the worst. Okay, there's a Pixar rule that if there's something that's convenient, if it's a positive thing, don't use it. If it's a negative thing, go right ahead and use that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think for me, this gets to what I find frustrating about the movie because at the core, this whole situation is a product of Will's selfish choice to not acknowledge and address what is happening to his father. I mean, he's trying to address it in the way he knows how, but he's not willing to take the precautions that put his father at risk.
yeah.
I mean, his father needs care that Will can't provide because he has this job where he's trying to help his dad, and he is unwilling to put his father at home. Again, very compassionate, but at the same point, this was again, narratively makes sense, but it's just so frustrating to see this a character of such,
Well, yeah, I'm going to agree with you at this point. The shot where he's like, he says, "Oh, the Alzheimer's is going to come back hard," and then it cuts to him going out the door, and the dad going out the door. I'm like, why aren't you there?
Yeah.
Like, why is this happening?
Exactly, and but who is there? Caesar's there.
Yeah,
and so he looks out the window and he sees Douglas poking his index finger at a confused Charles, and a member of his pack is being.
It does a great job of putting you inside Caesar's head.
Yes, I mean that is very well done. And so Caesar attacks Douglas. He beats on Douglas. He chases Douglas, and he climaxes with him nearly biting his finger off.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was originally written that he did bite the finger off, but apparently they toned it down because it would made Caesar seem a little too unsympathetic.
Oh, I thought they really did.
I know that's what I thought first too, but I had to go back. It's not entirely visible. I think in the end when we see Douglas at the airport, he's not missing a finger.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah. So then Caesar is quite understandably taken by animal control to.
Oh, okay, real quick, I should have pointed this out when you were there, but as he's looking out the window, like they do a great job of this window, and this window is a motif. And what it represents is freedom. Like outside that window is freedom. He may be in a really nice, loving house, but at the end of the day, he's still a pet, and he can't get past that window. If every time he goes out that window, it's something bad happens, and it'll come up.
Yeah, it
later,
comes up twice more than I can think of in particular.
So freedom.
Yeah,
yeah, and they do a great type edit, which is where it goes from a thing of one shape to the thing of the exact same shape. So this window, it's hard to explain. I mean, if you're listening to this, you've watched the movie, but it's got like this point coming down from the circle, making like this inverted arch thing that ends up being exactly the same shape of the Brooklyn Bridge, or not the bridge, sorry, the Golden Gate Bridge. So yeah,
I hadn't picked up on that. That's
they do a fade from that to the Golden Gate Bridge.
So, but anyhow, Caesar's is taken to animal control, or taken by animal control to a local primate shelter, which apparently they have in San Francisco. You know,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Astronomical, Silicon Valley real estate prices, but we have enough space for a primate shelter.
Yeah.
And there we are introduced to the manager of the place, played by a criminally underused Brian Cox.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to be his son as well as one of the guards.
Well, I kind of like how he just serves his purpose in this movie. But I mean, as an actor, I'm always down to see more Brian Cox.
Yeah. But again, it's like, I hope the check bought him, a nice extension to his house or something. But we do get a lot more from Tom Felton, who plays Dodge, who's the guard that torments him. And
Malfoy himself.
Yeah,
Malfoy.
And it's where I kind of feel bad for Tom Felton. I guess it's his lot in life to play the scumbag.
It works.
It works. Yeah, he's good at it.
It's good.
So then, of course, Will wants to get Caesar out, so he goes to the city and he tries to flex his privilege. I love how the clerk is like, well, this you have to this we'll have a hearing in 90 days. He's like, no, you go back to the computer and get him out now. And she's like, no.
Yeah.
So
all that for no reason.
I'm sorry, what?
It was all that for no reason. I was like,
exactly.
For me, it was like, why you even put that in the scene? Like,
yeah. I mean,
nothing happened out of it.
I shared the fact that Will's being cut down to size, but it really doesn't serve a purpose. Well, I actually take it back.
Maybe a little bit.
It motivates him to go to Jacobs and finally own up to what he's been doing for the past 8 years. Mm-hmm. We smuggled out this chimpanzee who was supposed to be destroyed. It's been exposed to AZL. I've given it to my dad. And Jacobs is like, great, we finally proved this. But it's not working, so I want to do this. I want to do this next thing, AZL 113. And setting aside the fact there's a bad luck number in it, I'm convinced this will be better because it's going to be viral now. And Jacobs is like, great, let's do it. And so they give it to a bonobo named Koba. But of course, as they're giving it to Koba, there's this, Koba, reacts, aggressively, and it knocks this aerosolizer they're using, and it knocks off the trying to remember the guy's name, the handler, the primatologist, Robert.
Fat beardy man.
Yeah, Tyler Levine's character. I should think of Tyler Levine. It knocks off Robert's mask, and so he's been exposed to this. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, why didn't they quarantine Robert?
Yeah.
Again, it's like this to me is kind of like where it climaxes for me of the stupid things they do in the movie that are just so contrary to reality. And I know we're talking about apes that speak, but nonetheless, it's just like
this isn't real. Apes don't speak.
But it's like for the purpose of the plot, Robert has to be able to kind of dance around even as he starts to show symptoms, because if we do what anybody with half a brain does, which is like, oh, he's been exposed, let's quarantine him and see if he has any effects, which he starts to demonstrate almost immediately. But he's literally sneezing blood in front of Will, and Will's like, oh, get a tissue for that. So, but we periodically cut back to Caesar, and he is not doing well in this primate shelter. He's being tortured by Dodge. He doesn't get along with the alpha chimp, Rocket. It's really, and this is where, I mean, it really is Caesar's story, because it's so well done. And here you have to credit Andy Serkis.
Yeah, they take every little step of this process of it. This is the big negative that I have for the other movie. Of they skip some very big steps of getting to this revolution part. This one methodically, I don't know if methodically is the right word, but every little point that it needs to take. Like when he first comes in, he's this smart chimp in this cage with all these other chimps around him, and it's a madhouse part where they start going crazy. And
again, shout out to the original movie.
It's clear just the visual contrast between him just in the cage on it like a human, and these other chimps like banging against the cage is like crazy. It puts you in his head of like, yeah, I would be going nuts in here too. They're ironically going nuts, but he's going nuts on the inside. Yes. And then they go to him lying on the floor later on, and he gets up and he finds this rock on the floor and he carves his window in the wall. It's a circle with 4 little things in there forming a little pointy star.
But then later, when Will comes to visit him, and Caesar's like, I get to go home, and Will's like, no, I can't. Then he goes and he erases the window.
Yeah,
and that's when you know he's decided.
Decision has been made.
The decision has been made. So and so he reasons his way out of it. He figures out, first of all, he figures out how to get out of his cage. Then he figures out how to.
So let me just revisit that moment real quick. That's like when he goes from like the first way that he reacts to all these apes is like, I'm not one of you, and
he wears clothing.
At that point, what? There's a scene with Rocket where he lets out the gorilla, and
I was getting to that.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, cool. Yeah. And then, but anyway, that moment when he erases the window, that's when he goes away from. He's not siding with humanity anymore. The apes are his people now. So.
And he's going to and he very quickly establishes himself as their leader. Once he figures out how to get out of his cage, he lets out the gorilla Buck, and in doing so, he makes that alliance with Buck. Then he gets Rocket out and puts Rocket in a situation where Rocket submits. It's very because he does it without violence.
Yeah,
he just simply basically intimidates Rocket into submitting, and it's so neatly done.
It's definitely biblical. Both these movies, Moses being raised by.
Have you seen the third movie? Have you seen? Because the third movie they take that very literally.
Kingdom?
War.
Oh, War. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I can't get these names straight of the series.
It's like they gotta put numbers next to them.
I know, right?
But yeah, if you haven't watched it, watch War because they do that
I
very literally.
I should watch it again. Like I said, I'll watch it again. Dawn
is my favorite, but War they do the Moses thing where he takes them out of Egypt. So yeah. Anyway.
So then we cut back to Will, who's decided that, now that he has ALZ 113, he's going to try to save his father. So he takes it to his father. And Charles, who demonstrates that, basically the wisdom in the family stopped with him, decides, I'm done being your guinea pig. He refuses the treatment, and then he passes away. There's, there's evidently been a funeral. And this is when Will suddenly decides to be a ethical scientist who follows protocols because he goes back to work and he discovers that they're now testing more. They're testing more apes with ALZ 113. And
he has no more reason to continue it, right? It was for his dad.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now that he's given up.
Initially, he's talking about how it's going to be great for Alzheimer's. We're going to make lots of money. But it turns out it was just his dad.
Yeah, just for dad.
And now all of a sudden he decides, now I need to be a responsible scientist and say, this is wrong. And we should,
Okay, let me point it out here.
Yes.
This is where I'd say his character is consistent. Like he does some very terrible mistakes, but it was about his dad. And now the dad thing is up. Yep, now time to step back into rational scientist mode.
I agree with this consistency, but to me, it's one of the reasons why I can't see him as the hero because he's
not at all the hero.
It's because he's doing it entirely for selfish purposes. Yeah. He's willing to break.
That's what I'm. If there's a villain in this, it's him. But your anti-villain thing. That's probably I haven't looked into that term, but that's probably spot on.
Yeah.
So,
and it's just and this kind of exposes it where it's kind of like but it's the point where because if he had been that responsible from the start, yes, his father would pass away, but then that was going to happen eventually anyway, as we see. But also, it wouldn't have gotten to a point now where there is this, chemical which for some reason is already being mass produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's not forget that even though he brought ALZ 113 home to treat his father and his father refused it, he still has 3 containers in the refrigerator, right next to the mustard. I'm sure that will play a part in the movie.
Don't eat that mustard.
And then we cut to Robert, who is not doing so hot. He's sweating, he's bleeding, and for some reason he goes to Will's house because I guess the phones don't work. But he's like pounding on the door. I gotta talk to you,
Well, maybe
Will.
his brain's not working so great.
But apparently he can still drive or something. And of course, Douglas comes out, and Robert, sneezes on him, and his service to the plot being over, he goes home and dies. It's like he's not a character. He's a plot device. He served his role. So, and this is where Will does something here, and I really do like this. He tries to bribe Brian Cox's character to get Caesar out, and I like this because again, I agree with you. His characterization is very consistent. He says at one point about that he can't lose both his dad and Caesar. And with his father dead, he's like, he's got to save Caesar. And he actually, convinces Brian Cox to let him out. And Cox goes to, let him out. And Caesar's like, I'm going to stay. It's kind of like, your kid doesn't want to go to camp. And then you're like there to pick him up. And I don't want to leave.
Yeah. It's a little more serious than that, though, because he's like, he doesn't consider himself a part of his home anymore. Like,
but also he doesn't want to go back to not being free.
Yeah.
Even though he's in jail, of course, he's decided that he's gonna get everybody free, not just himself.
Yeah. He's kind of, I'm mid-revolution here. I can't go with you. So
again, with the Moses thing, I really like that.
Yeah.
And I love Brian Cox's reaction. I guess he likes staying here. And we know how bad of a place it is. But, I guess this is, chimpanzee paradise. What can I say? So I run a good place. So even though he doesn't. So, but so then Caesar escapes from the facility. He goes back to Will's house, and then he knows to go to the refrigerator. And there he sees the containers of ALC-113, which Will has just conveniently left there.
Wouldn't he have? I may not have gotten this right, but wouldn't he have seen it earlier when Will was giving it to his dad?
He would have seen the ALC-112.
So
maybe he's looking for the ALC.
Keep it in the same spot.
That explains it. He's looking for the ALZ-112.
Yeah.
And he sees the ALZ-1. Okay, that makes more sense.
So he doesn't know which one is which, but he
figures out because he sprays it and kind of realizes that this is something that's a little different. And of course, with an aerosol can, he can go ahead and basically kind of do a mass exposure by just rolling up cans, and pretty soon every primate in the place is smarter than Dodge.
I love that shot where they're crawling out of that hole, and each one of them their eyes are glowing, but they also, I don't know how they did this, if it was the motion capture or animation or whatever, but they have that look of intelligence in their eyes, and it's so cool. Green. Yeah.
I love the scene that follows where Brian Cox he's going to go home, and he's like, I'm gonna go get my keys, and he sees Caesar and all the apes are standing there, and he's like, what the hell? And
then he looks back, and they disperse, and it's like
such a problem with that. You see that you don't do anything, you're just like, okay, go.
Well, we already said.
I think it was like, did I see what I just saw?
Okay, maybe.
And then
no, I'm just, but I don't know. If I would have saw that, I'm like,
I guess I'm working long hours, too many long hours, selling monkeys to
I don't know if I'd jump to Ape Revolution when I'd see that, but
but it's still odd.
Yeah.
So then, Dodge sees Caesar out of his cage, and he attempts to get him back in. And of course, he's going to do it in the way that Dodge does it, which is he's going to do it with his little shock stick and a lot of brutality.
Oh, this part is so great.
Yes, it is. It's so great. Yeah. I really felt. Dodge was the villain. What happens here is so satisfying and so deserved. Where Dodge, Caesar bellows no first time we hear him talk. Yeah. He then knocks out Dodge. He then frees the other apes, and then he incapacitates the other guard. But then Dodge is staying there with his shock stick, and he's going to have it out with Caesar. And then Caesar takes the hose and electrocutes him.
Yeah,
it was so nicely done. But now they're going to go to Genesis, which Caesar knows about because Will showed him, and they free the apes there. It's pretty much at this point it's about basically recruiting every ape in the Bay Area to be part of this exodus to Muir Woods. And this
did we skip over? Yeah, we skipped over No, I think you mentioned the bonobo who wrote Jacob's name.
Oh, Koba. Yeah,
Koba.
I mentioned,
Koba.
but I didn't mention the fact that when he writes Jacob's name, oh my gosh, Jacob's is like they should have had like cartoon dollars pop up in his eyes, and that's where he's like, we're just going to make gallons of this stuff. We don't know exactly what it does.
I would be terrified, but for him, I guess the dollar signs outweighed the terror. Yeah. But he plays kind of a small role in this one, Koba, but in the next movie he plays a very big role.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell they're kind of setting him up as being he's not quite as, and you see it at the end when Koba confronts Will, but I mean they're implying that Koba's a little bit more embittered, than
for
Caesar.
sure.
But you also have that great scene where Jacobs is going to the building and gets the call. It turns out that Robert's dead, and it turns out it's viral. It turns out it's ALZ 113, but.
Sorry.
But
no, just back to Koba. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Go ahead.
I mean, Caesar. What Caesar? Wasn't Caesar? No, was Caesar running from in Roman times? Was Caesar running from somebody? Or was that somebody else running from? Because there were three big ones: Pompey,
Crassus, and Caesar.
Wasn't one of them running from one of their other?
Well, during the Civil War, Pompey flees Rome and is chased by Caesar.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
The Koba is more of a reference. That's actually a reference to Stalin.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the ones where the names are a little too on point. It's like the moment I see the name Koba, I'm like, oh yeah, they're setting him up to be a villain.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like you're not going to ever find a good guy named like Archie Hitler or something like that.
Yeah. Well, nowadays you're not going to find anybody named Hitler.
Yeah, exactly.
I met one guy named Adolf.
Adolf, yeah.
Mm-hmm. One guy.
Which I mean, it's a perfectly nice name. Just has an unfortunate context.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But of course, this is where we get the great action sequence where the apes are rampaging through San Francisco. I mean, my favorite one is the animal control guy who catches the one
funny.
ape. He puts it in the back, and then all of a sudden they start chucking spears at his van, and they bust out the other ape, and they go off. And
well, at least they're consistent with apes knowing how to use weapons.
Yeah, and also how I think it's Buck who figures out how to use the manhole cover as a discus, and he smashes up the one police car. It's interesting. They do seem to be trying to minimize casualties. There's that one scene on the bridge where I can't remember if it's Buck or someone else is about to kill the police officer, and he's like, no.
Yeah. So it's the same no that he screams. Okay.
He's trying to run an ethical revolution here, people.
Yeah, I love how they set up like what kind of thing he's doing. Right as you start to worry, is this going to be a murdering humans thing? Caesar sets up like no killing, which is in the next movie. He has a set of rules of like apes together strong. No kill other ape or I don't know.
Well, that's the difference between the first these two movies, right? The first one, they were all being suppressed, and the next one, the second movie we watched, it's just experiments, so they're not necessarily being treated like slaves. Yeah. So Caesar in the second movie is like has more compassion than because his will didn't die, right?
Although. We can get to that later if we want to, but you then have, of course, because they're heading towards Muir Woods, they have to cross the Golden Gate Bridge, and apparently the plan is that they're going to box them in and mow them down. And
before we get into the plans of this, I just want to point out go back to the Moses thing. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, it's the parting of the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Bridge.
Yeah. And he's leading his people to the promised land.
Exactly. Literally, they're getting to the Redwoods. That's
and so I guess then the San Francisco Police Department, the California Highway Patrol are Pharaoh's army in this analogy.
Yeah.
So. But
they don't get drowned.
But they don't get, well, one
gets tossed over the bridge.
Yes, and he does die because I mean there's a reason why people are committing suicide.
Well, I mean it's war, but like you gotta have. I like that he sets the standard of we're not here to get revenge and to murder, or not that humans have been killing apes, but they're not there to to take out their stuff on people. They're just there to get to freedom.
And of course, we had that one exception coming up just a moment, which again sets up the next movie. But
Yeah.
but so you had the police barricade, which the apes break through. Not as many casualties as you might think. And that's kind of where I was kind of like, but yeah. But at one point they're pinned down by the machine gun fire from the CHP helicopter, which Jacobs is in. He's pointing out Caeser, and they're trying to machine gun him. And then Buck does this heroic sacrifice where he, jumps up. I so love this scene. Buck's jumping to the helicopter, and you see that police officer. He's just with his pistol, bam. It's not doing a darn thing to stop Buck. It's like 800 pounds of Grell coming towards him, and I don't care how powerful 9mm. It's not going to push Buck back.
No.
There's the moment that we missed where all these guerrillas start pushing this bus, and I'm like,
yes.
oh my goodness, they strong boys.
Yes, they are. And it works because it kind of throws, and it's a great distraction because while they're all focused on the bus moving towards them, the apes are coming up from the top. Again, it's another example of strategy. Although Caeser directs them, so at least you have that. But it's also where cops didn't think this one through.
Right. But it's also, you can see the differences in the different breeds and the roles that they played. Gorilla, muscle, orangutan, brains, strategist.
And the orangutans were the ones that won underneath on the bridge.
Yeah. So you had the general, you had generals, lieutenants, you had everybody like all formed up. I'm like, already?
That's cool.
I mean, it's a little less organized than what we see in Conquest, so it's somewhat more plausible. But again, it's an example where they all seem to know what to do instinctively, and it's more than just being apes. It's about strategy and tactics and all this stuff. And it does work. I mean, you see all these.
Okay, to be fair, I think most of it comes from Caeser, and not that he's been trained as a tactician, but maybe he's just a natural tactician of like, you guys go up there, you guys go down there. But I mean, I'm not the army guy here, but yeah, I think they're playing it more as that than these guys have been trained and they know what they're doing.
Well, see, again, let's go back to the beginning of the movie. Caesar's cognitive skills far exceed those of a human counterpart. Yeah. So we have your typical human general, and we have apparently Julius Caesar here in command of the apes or something like that. So, but you have, Buck sacrifices himself to bring down the helicopter, and you have that touching scene where Caesar, is moved by what he does, and he sees Jacobs, who somehow lives to this point, and saying, "Help me," and Caesar's like, "No, you're okay." And it was kind of, for me, it was almost like a Batman Begins moment where I don't have to save you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then Koba comes up and he's like, "Yeah, push."
Mm-hmm.
and
okay, I like that better. The way that I saw it was like he sent Koba in to do it. I'm like, there's no difference, but yeah, like I don't know.
He doesn't exactly scream no to Koba when Koba's doing it. True. So.
I'm gonna go on my soapbox for a minute here.
Go ahead.
I don't like this kind of bad guying because they do have that one bad guy in the movie that I'm sure he's a more awesome person in person since you've met him. But anyway, his character, it's like money, nothing else.
Yeah,
and then he doesn't have a character.
Yeah.
And it's to the point, they just want you to hate him, and then they want you to root for it when he falls off. I don't like that kind of thing.
He's got a slick suit. He's got a great car. He's got cool sunglasses. What else do you need to characterize someone?
So. But did he, at the same time, did he deserve that? Because did he treat Koba inhumane, or not? Well, probably did, but did he mistreat him in a physical way where he was beating him, or?
No, it's not like they said, well, let's see if electroshock will cause him to get smarter. They didn't do things like that. I mean, it's in this sense, his villainy is no greater than that of Will's.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
he just happens to like money a little more.
Exactly. He's more motivated by greed instead of the desire to help his father overcome Alzheimer's. So I guess that makes him a worse person. Even though the end is
I guess that's what I'm saying. Like when I'm talking about movies they shine this spotlight on people in a certain way that in real life you wouldn't see them this way, or you might if that's what your predisposition is, but just movies have a way of twisting your perception to make you go, oh yeah, he's the worst of the worst, and it's like he's not really that bad.
I mean, he played Dr. King in Selma.
Oh, did he? That's the same guy?
That's the same guy.
Oh.
Wow.
So, like, he's range.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, I mean, he's another example, and this gets to, I think, what we've been talking about. That I feel like all the human actors, with the exception of James Franco, are criminally underused. I mean, their characters not very well developed, and you get the impression it's like watching weightlifters, moving around toothpicks. They're just so they're so much more versatile than the material they're given. Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably could have had humans as CGI for all of the necessity that they bring. For me, Lithgow is a great exception because he's given that opportunity to play someone suffering from Alzheimer's to someone who recovers, who goes back into it, and he captures that pathos so well. But everyone else, I mean, just they're at if they were two-dimensional, then sometimes it was an effort on their part to squeeze in that extra dimension for what the script gave them. So, but we get to the climax of the movie where the apes have reached Muir Woods, and Will chases after him so he can have that final conversation with Caeser, where initially Koba's prepared to kill Will, and Caesar's like no, and Will and Will says I'll protect you because you know what they can bring in. I'm thinking, really? Actually, no, you can't do anything. No, my favorite part is this is all my fault, and this is the point where I screamed at the television. You think? I mean, can we list all the reasons? But then he's like, I'll protect you. I'm thinking because you've done such a bang up job so far. I mean, you couldn't stop animal control from taking him to the primate shelter. Or you think you're gonna after this you're gonna stop him from being euthanized by the military because that's what's going to happen next.
Yeah, but then we may have the greatest movie, well, maybe second greatest moment of the movie here. And even after he says no, they use it very sparingly. But at this point, like you hear him say his first sentence. He's like, "I'll take you back home," and he's like, "Caesar is home." Mm-hmm. It's so great. Andy Serkis, oh my goodness. If he were not behind the makeup of motion capture, he would have an Oscar by this point. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the movie, with the exception of the mid-credits scene where we find out that Douglas still has one more, plot role to play, which is that turns out he's a pilot and he's been infected with ALZ-113, and he's at the airport and he, sneezes out some blood and shrugs his shoulders and gets on a plane and poisons the world. The end.
And they mentioned he was a pilot in his first interaction with...
Did they?
Yeah, he said, I'm a pilot, I got to get to work.
Oh, I missed that part.
With the card.
And apparently doesn't fly Southwest because you infer from the end credits that...
he said he needed to get to the airport is what he said. Yeah, so I didn't pick up on he's a pilot. Yeah. Well, I thought they just had a flight.
Oh, I thought
no. I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that they said he needs to get to the airport. So I just assumed, he's got a flight to get to.
Oh, I thought he said I'm a pilot.
But apparently he's, I love how, he's bleeding and there's no thought of, well, maybe I shouldn't fly today. He just bleeds. I'm like, I'm just going to get on the plane and spread the disease of the world.
Hey, with inflation, you got to get to work, right?
So that's our review of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, 2011. Every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go crisscross.
Crisscross.
I think the most obvious parallel between these two, I pointed out in the opener, it's about an ape named Caesar that ends up forming a revolution. Both of them. So,
and both use a virus to kind of bring down humanity or kind of civilization, because
Oh yeah, for the cats and dogs.
Mm-hmm.
For the cats and dogs, and I guess in the first one, the humans were kind of immune, they said, but still, without, I guess, their pets, the society kind of crumbled. And then
there is this sense in both of them of how humans create this, because the virus, while it was space-borne, was brought to Earth by humans. And here we see a human who's invented a virus, which brings it down. But the difference, of course, is that in one of them, it sort of just creates a new human society, whereas the other one, it ends up bringing about the downfall of humanity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, again, this gets, and I know I've made this point in other podcasts. I mean, it's one of the things I love about science fiction is how it is, in so many ways, a vehicle for talking about our anxieties of the time. And what I love, and this is true for all the original series, it's talking about America, the 1960s, 1970s. It's done very well. And to have it 2011, it's doing the same thing, but the concerns are different. I mean, it's much more. I mean, whereas in Conquest, it's social commentary, it's commentary about politics. In 2011, it's more about science and how we're trying to do all these things that have all these unintended consequences.
It'll be a good parallel to Fringe. Not that has anything to do with this, but go watch it. It's good.
It's fantastic.
It's on Max. So.
So you have with that the idea of how we, and this is kind of, I think, a commonality between the two films, but albeit with different approaches, how in so many ways we become the instruments of our own destruction. And we can talk about, there are lots of things that could happen to us that are beyond our control. There are lots of things that which humanity could, be wiped out that are beyond our control. But so much of it is about what we do, that we can create a society in which the oppression becomes so intolerable that we destroy it. Or we can, for the best of intentions, try to do wonderful things, and it ends up backfiring horrifically. And but it's the sobering sense of the need to be responsible. And I think that I enjoyed that message better in Conquest because I felt that the society deserved what it got. And I didn't think that was the case in Rise.
Yeah, the first time I saw Rise, I had a problem with particularly the bridge fight, and I guess I must have missed the part where the girl is about to kill the guy, and he's like, "No." I'm like, "Am I really on the side of the monkeys here?" Like, they're just cops. Like, I don't know. If I would have cut that moment, I think I would have been more on Caesar's side, and in further movies, I very much have been on his side. In this has nothing to do with this one, but in Dawn, they handle that dynamic of the Greys much better. Like no one side is completely right. Caesar is like a very moral character, and there's another parallel moral character, but it's a bunch of Greys, and it's like you've got to. They do it very well. It's nuanced, is what I'd say. So, but for okay, I'll get to if you're done. Are you done with your point?
No, I'm done with that point,
yeah. So the next thing that I noticed was just, and this is where I'm gonna beat on Conquest a little bit. I'll do it through a positive way of saying how it works great in Rise. They show that journey from child ape, although he's an intelligent child ape, going to realizing he's not human, going into the den of apes, and then they he doesn't feel one with them at all, to put it at its for the very least. But when there's that window moment where he erases the window, and he's basically choosing, these are my people now. Like, my father's not my. Maybe it's a coming of age moment. Like, he's stepping out. I just like how they take it nuanced every single moment. You see how he comes to these decisions.
Yeah, the buildup was definitely different, and him relating to who he was around, Caeser in 2011, giving them each of them a cookie, giving them time to do whatever, and spending time with them in the open cage with the tree.
Yeah,
you know, there was more interaction, more relation there.
Yeah, and then that's kind of where Conquest drops the ball the biggest for me. It jumps some big hurdles of, okay, where'd he meet all these, and this I guess comes down to storytelling functions of they don't have proper setups for where do all these apes come from. It's just suddenly, we got a horde of apes coming at us.
Yeah, and I think right there, and that gets to one of the distinctive differences between the two from a filmmaking perspective is that Conquest is a tight 90, and Rise is, I think, over 2 hours. Is it?
Yeah, it was longer.
Yeah. That was a thing that I noticed too. Of they could have used the extra 30 minutes to flesh that out a little more.
Yeah, and that's definitely missing.
Again, budget wise, maybe they didn't have that, but I don't know. It
really, and this to tie back to your original point, is that it really is fascinating to see how what we are seeing is, it'd be really interesting to run these, from a filmmaking storytelling perspective and say, okay, how do we get to a predetermined goal, and how do we advance the story in there? And what we see here is these films are at their core about a revolution.
Yeah.
The parameters of that revolution, the forms it takes are different, but it's what led us to choose that for this to begin with, which is that we're going to say, okay, we have these two. We're talking about the point at which the dawn, the planet of the apes becomes a thing. We were introduced to it in the very first one, and then we go back to a point where it doesn't exist. We had to figure out how it's going to happen. And here it's like we're going to start with that, which I actually think is not a terrible choice to make. I just qualms with that, but it really is interesting about how the different paths they take to say we need to establish this very different world, and kind of build it up in a way that is engaging for people, and it explains it in ways that make sense. So, okay,
do we have any more comments on that subject, or should we move on to?
Didn't mean to go back to it.
No, it's good. I just have another very cool subject coming up. They use this as this is a parallel of what they do with the talking. Like there's no talking apes, of course, in our world in the 2011 one, and there's no talking apes yet in the 1991 filmed in 1972 Conquest. I don't think they were going for the shock of it that comes through in Rise. Mm-hmm. So I'll give them that, but it just is not as impactful when he speaks in that movie. This is just a point for me to nerd out about the part where Caeser goes, no, like it's the first time I saw that, like that was just so amazing. And they set it up very well of he's an intelligent ape, but he can't speak. And they just have that as an assumption. And you don't even consider the possibility that he could speak, even though you've got in the back of your head, like this is going to speaking apes. That's where we're going to end up. But the reveal of that, I think they do at the perfect moment. I think it's right at the turn of Act 3. They hold it as long as they possibly can, and then finally, as the oppression of the system is the worst on him, and it's all about the setup too. If he were just yelled no out of nowhere, it would not. But we got the most oppressive character under the command of the second most, or the other, big guy, whatever. Point being, Malfoy's about to smack him, and he grabs his arm, and he just rears up like that, and he's like, no! And it's like, Andy Serkis is just amazing. I guess I'm just nerding out about Andy Serkis's acting.
I wonder if when throughout 2011 film that they were saying no, that he could just say that word. Was it Malfoy saying no to him? So
Yeah,
he repeated it. Okay.
The setup for it.
Yeah, because in the 1972, everybody says no.
Yeah, 1972, they do have a lot of setup for that. So that's a good point for Conquest. They have a lot of setup for Lisa. Is it Lisa?
Lisa. Yes.
Yeah, saying no at that, and I really like that. And they may have stolen that from there.
Maybe. And I think Will says no a lot to him too, though, throughout the film. So probably.
Well, the parallel that I would turn to with that is the original Planet of the Apes. And again, this is something we talked about at the very beginning of the recap, and we dropped it, but which is that it's a similar thing in that movie, which I mean I still think hands down is the best Planet of the Apes movie of all time. They could probably make another 20. I still don't think it'll be surpassed. Where the premise being that you have human astronauts that land on what they think is an alien planet, and very quickly they're kind of taken out of their comfort zone. One of them is dead. The other three are basically trying to find their way, and Charlton Heston's character is injured in a way where he can't speak. So for like the first third of the movie, for like about a third of the movie, he is basically mute. He's trying to communicate. This is when Zyra calls him Bright Eyes. They think he's just like a super intelligent human, but they don't think he's so intelligent as to be able to speak. What's interesting is that we find out later on that both the other astronauts were also captured. One of whom lives, but they lobotomize him so he can't speak. That goes to how it goes to what you see in Conquest, which is that the idea of a speaking animal is anathema. It's objectionable. So in the case of the original movie, the orangutans do it. But so when you have that famous scene, which is quoted, where Taylor is being pursued by gorillas, and they're trying to, because he's basically on the loose, and they're trying to capture him, and they have him, and he says that iconic line, get your paws off me, you damn dirty apes. That is a revelation. That's the first time that they hear a human speak, and it is kind of that. Yeah,
I dropped the ball on that one. That's exactly where that comes from.
Yeah, exactly. So, kind of that shock moment of wow, this not what I was expecting.
So point to original Planet of the Apes on that one.
And it's a direct link because they're constantly paying homage to it. So in a way that they don't do quite as much with Conquest, even though both of them are are basically trying to tell the same basic story.
Yeah, the thing that I think I like most about, besides Caeser as a character himself, which actually might be my favorite fictional character in movies at least, is the way that they use the apes as just a parallel for humans. And I guess the Conquest does that too, but it's more, I don't know if nuanced is the word, but like, especially when it gets to Dawn, it's just a metaphor that's not, it's just for any group of humans versus any group of humans. So it's more a metaphor for, that one really should have been called War, because that's where the war stuff happens, and that's where we deal with the conflict between two factions. But they really set it up in this one that I don't think I realized till I watched back. And this one of just just setting up the apes as parallels to humans rather than, I mean, with Conquest, it's very blatant of, okay, this is about slavery. These ones are a bit more, I guess, vague might be a good word, but like in a good way of, you could just apply this to any two factions of, and I don't want to say that it's bad for doing the slave parallel, because of course we need that, but it might be more universal for that fact with the newer ones of, you can apply this to any two groups of people.
Well, it gets to what I think
know.
is the genius of the franchise, which is it's so malleable. I mean, the whole premise of it is we're going to go ahead and use these apes to provide, commentary about humanity, which, again, is one of the great things I always find about science fiction, which is how we can take these fantastical concepts of robots and alien cultures, but really ultimately it serves as a way of making commentary about ourselves today that we otherwise may not normally be able to, or may not feel as comfortable doing directly.
Yeah. You have me wanting to nerd out about Fringe again. For a lot of people, it might be Star Trek, but yeah. Yeah, I love, that's probably what draws me to science fiction the most. When I'm not doing silly alien thing with science fiction. I read that script the other day. Anyway, but yeah, some great points. Hugh, did you have anything that we haven't covered? Any parallels or even differences? Like,
thinking about after hearing you guys talk about your opinions on both movies, I'm kind of drawn more towards Conquest.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the Revolution made more sense to me. More black and white. But my frustrations were...
I agree with that point.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that lost me the first time I watched Rise. I'm like, am I really on board with this revolution against humans, and the soldiers aren't even actual soldiers, they're just policemen.
And I can't even say it was a revolution because they were just trying to escape.
Yeah.
So
true.
is it...
That was the other disappointing thing for me, of it doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the fascinating things about what happens in Rise, which is that Caesar could easily, and we already described the scene. Caesar could have escaped on his own. He made a choice to both uplift his species, the apes, and to lead them to freedom. And that is very much of a. They're not. I mean, they didn't have to escape. They weren't motivated to escape until they've been uplifted. And it was it was very much of a conscious choice to start a revolution, and then to, in effect, carve out a place and say, this is ours. So basically, what we're talking about here is 1776. So I guess, but it is so. I can see it. There definitely is that revolution thing, which is very enjoyable. It's not quite as graphic and as overt as Conquest. Of course, Conquest had an advantage, which is that they could build upon 3 movies of storytelling.
That was another thing, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, because Rise was the first of its...
Yeah, it's the first.
And then, it was just the differences there.
Yeah, Rise is not my favorite of the trilogy, because I mostly see it as a setup for Dawn, which is amazing, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Dawn is not the one that he has the child, right? Dawn is the second one.
Oh, no, the third one is, you mean the human child?
No, the Caesar has a kid.
Oh yeah, that's right. Both Caesar does have a kid in Dawn.
And then
he also has it in War.
Oh shoot!
You did say there's spoilers. I haven't seen either one, but I know
I
what's
saw
going to
both,
happen.
but I can't remember.
I was about to give a big spoiler for third one, but I'm not going to say that.
All right, okay. Keep it at that then.
Okay.
There's actually one thing I do want to mention.
Yeah.
That just as an aside, that's not part of the crisscross, is that there is something that happens in the movie in Rise that I had to look up, and it's another callback to the original Planet of the Apes, which is you see a couple scenes and they're kind of head scratcher scenes because they seem so out of place. It's the reference to the Icarus spaceship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is supposedly going to Mars. It's 2 scenes. One, it's like the Icarus ship is
lost in space on the magazine on there. Or the newspaper. Sorry.
There is speculation that this is going to be called back in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, in Kingdom? Oh, okay. Well, that is a direct reference to the original 3 astronauts. And
yeah, because the original expedition in Planet of the Apes, that was the Icarus expedition. So just we'll stay tuned. I could be just following conspiracy theories on the internet, or I could be prophetic. We shall see. So
yeah. Okay. Cool. That was a very fun episode. Now we're going to do our star ratings of the movies. Our star ratings for Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, 1972. Mark, you go first.
To me, it's a 4-star movie. I mean, it's definitely, in terms of quality, in terms of budget, you could definitely see the cutbacks that Fox was imposing upon the series the further they got into it. But I find the way that it very directly and unflinchingly talks about what was happening with, race relations in America at the time, the way that it was very unabashedly drew upon a lot of imagery to make its point. I find it is very powerful, and I of the latter three movies that they do in that series, it is by far my favorite. That's why it gets 4 stars for me. I mean, you can see some of the flaws in it. It definitely was done on the cheap, but it's amazing what they did with what they had. And to me, that is just that's filmmaking at its finest.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, Hugh, what rating?
Well, I do agree that they did amazing with what they did with what they had. Mm-hmm. But I would probably give it a 3.5 stars. Okay. I did enjoy the story. I really enjoyed the acting. But some of the movie in general was dragged out when they probably didn't need, like the end fight scene for me, like the whole revolution, that dragged out a little bit long. I was kind of getting bored. I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get to it. But
there were a lot of cordons that kept breaking through. It's like there's this cord and then this cord.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought they could have implemented more things throughout the movie with the time that they did have. But overall, yeah, 3.5 for its time. I think it was great. Star Wars came out not too long after.
Yeah, 5 years after.
Yeah, 5 years after. So, considering, I was like, oh man, yeah, this is good. And like we talked about earlier, you grew up with it. My mom loved it. So it's definitely a good movie.
How about you, Aaron? Cool.
Okay, my rating. Sorry, we're going down a slope here, but I've got to give it 3. I think I already pointed out the negatives that I saw of just it could have fleshed out the steps getting to Revolution better, and him making those relationships with the apes. But that could just be me nerding about having Rise in the back of my head as I was watching it. But the thing that I love most about it, though, is the end and that last speech that he gives. And I love the last turn that he takes with it, even though it was a reshoot. It's powerful. That maybe the power that it has in there of why that turn works so well is because they fully were going the other direction, and so it sells you on that, and you're like, oh no, it's gonna go that way, and then they do the last minute turn about face. And
the fascinating thing about it is that it really is atonal with the arc of the entire story, which is that you're supposed to get to a point where the planet of the humans falls and the planet of the apes rises, and they decide at the very end, no, they're going to do something where they're going to try cohabitation for a bit. And it's unexpected, because you go into the movie expecting to see how we get to the planet of the apes.
Yeah.
And to me, I think about how it's even though the imagery is horrifying, even though it's more violent of a movie, it's a more optimistic ending than Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, that's true. The thing that pulls me over to Rise, though, is just you don't lose your main character. Like if they were to keep that original ending, it's like, yeah, we have to get there, but does making your main character a mass murderer although they are human, they're oppressive humans, like you're still killing people. But and
of course, Caesar spared that in Rise, because the mass murder in the end is Will and Jacob.
I was gonna say that it would make Caesar in Conquest more like James Franco's character. So I don't know. Very interesting comparisons between those two. They're very different, yet on the surface very similar. So now our star ratings of Rise of the Planet of the Apes 2011. Mark?
I'm going to give it a provisional 2. And the reason why I say provisional is because your point about how Caesar is the protagonist has me intrigued. When we started this, I was like, this was a 2-star movie for me because I found Will so flipping frustrating as a character. But now that I want to go back now and watch it with the idea that
you definitely should.
That he realized
the rest of the series will make much more sense that way.
And that probably would bump it up a star for me. But pending that, it just has to be 2 stars because again, it was like there were so many annoying leaps they had to take in order to advance the plot that I just was tearing out what was left of my hair. So, you?
I'll give this one a 3. I agree that what you said earlier, Mark, that a lot of the characters were just not even really given their like a chance to shine or to like. It's just it was to move the story forward. I get that, but. And it is Caesar's story. I get that. But more could have been put in without taking away from Caesar.
Yeah.
That could have filled in some things.
For me, the comparison is when you compare the supporting character, because another parallel between both films, we didn't really develop this, but it's pretty obvious, is that Caesar's the central character in both movies. Whereas in Rise, we have that issue. Conquest, they do feel better developed. Even the antagonist, Breck, he felt like a well-rounded character. Yeah, I appreciated his. He was a jerk to the apes. He was horrible to them, but he was doing out of what he saw was the best interest of his species. He felt like a more nuanced character than say Jacobs, who were just where he's in it for the money. He's in it for the money. It's the best rationale we can give for this. And to me, again, that's one of the reasons why I find Conquest a more deserving film of a higher rating than Rise.
But that's also the issue with some of these films nowadays. They try to get all these stars into one movie, and you're like, why are you doing that just to build, the box office? But you're messing up the story at the same time with that because you're not giving them give a few people what we need for the story, and then
And that was a point I was thinking of as you were describing that Caesar's character, is that whether or not I might have appreciated Rise more and given it a higher rating if it had fewer human characters.
Yeah.
If it was more, if it was more overtly Caesar's story from the beginning instead of about Will and his, obsessive Ahab's quest to beat Alzheimer's, which I guess he did, even though he ended up wiping out humanity with it. So,
yeah, I agree. Because I'm thinking, like, when was Selma?
That came out.
I want to say 18
in the 10s.
No, that came out 2014.
2014.
But David was established, so they pulled him for the movie, and he's good, of course. And then Slumdog had come out. So they pulled her for the movie. But they could have used probably other actors that let us know if they're not going to give them that much to do.
Oh, yeah. That's what you're saying.
Again, I hope he enjoyed the check.
Yeah, right? He probably did.
Some lesser-known actor would enjoy it better.
That is true, but then he probably would have gotten paid as much. So.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so my rating. I'm going to go with 3.5. The reason I gave it 3.5 rather than just 3 is for Caesar's character. Like, that's the special sauce in this movie. Like, I guess I don't even think about the James Franco stuff because he's literally forgotten by the second movie. And that's kind of how I'm judging this one, as a setup, an Act 1 for the amazing Act 2 of Dawn. And I wish we were doing that movie at some point, but it's a tight schedule, and I'm not sure what we'd compare it to. But I'm probably going to go watch that sometime pretty soon.
Me too.
At least as a preparation for Kingdom, and so then that's. I guess basically that's the thing. It's Caesar's character that. It birthed Caesar's character, and the second movie really takes off with it. So I guess it's great it had a good sequel because I gave it another half star. So our next episode is going to be a very special episode. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here. My sister's going to be on it.
Nice.
And I just mentioned her recently in this episode. It's going to be I Am Sam, which is one of her favorite movies, and Peanut Butter Falcon. And she's not going to watch that one because she has no interest. I guess that's more of a boys' movie. But we'll at least have her for the first half of the episode. And that's about how long she can sit anyway. So that'll be very fun. She'll be talking about her favorite scenes, and there will probably be a lot from her in that one. Okay, Hugh, do you have anything that you want to plug?
Oh, yeah. So Time Hunt just dropped, and I was privileged to be the lead role, David, in this fascinating story about a guy who is trying to better his life, and he gets caught up with some, would you say
Lethal
supernatural?
Ghosts.
Lethal Ghosts?
I don't know.
I was going to say supernatural. I don't know.
Yeah, it's supernatural for sure.
Supernatural beings, and he navigates his way through that to get what he wants, which is to, again, better his life. He finds romance on the way.
Which would be Velia. Velia Moncada. She's going to be on our Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Princess Bride episode. So that'll be really fun.
That'll be fun. So definitely check that out. YouTube.
Yeah, I saw on our YouTube page, Transcend Entertainment. If you're listening to this, you're most likely there. You got a 50% chance or more of being there already. So go check it out. It's probably the header of the page, so just go there. Okay. If you like what you heard on the show today, and if you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Criss Cross and our sister show, Facets of Story, and probably behind the scenes for Time Haunt, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And that's today's Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.
Criss Cross.